The opera house blazed with 1,000 candles that night, their light glittering off jewels and silk like stars trapped in glass. But no amount of gold could distract from the man who strode through the royal entrance with another woman on his arm. Duke Adrian Blackthorne, seventh of his line, walked past his own wife without so much as a glance. The mistress, a French beauty draped in emeralds that should have belonged to the duchess, laughed too loudly at something he whispered. The sound echoed through marble corridors like a slap. Every fan in the room snapped open, every tongue prepared to spread poison. And in the center of it all sat Lady Vivienne Ashford, spine straight as iron, watching her husband destroy himself with the calm precision of someone who had already decided he was dead. What Adrian didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Betrayal has a ledger, and she had been keeping accounts for a very long time. If you want to see how a man built on arrogance comes apart at the seams, stay until the end of this story. Because what happens when a woman stops begging and starts planning is something London would talk about for decades. The night had started like every other performance season event. Vivienne had dressed in pale blue silk, a color Adrian once said made her eyes look like winter sky. She'd stopped wearing it after he stopped noticing. Tonight she chose it deliberately. Not for him, for herself. A reminder that she had existed before him and would exist after. Her lady's maid, Margaret, had fastened the pearls at her throat with shaking fingers. The older woman knew. The entire household knew. Servants always knew before the world did. "You shouldn't go tonight, my lady." Margaret's voice had been barely a whisper. Let him parade his shame alone. Vivienne had met her eyes in the mirror. "If I hide, I confirm what they all suspect, that I am broken, that he has won." She wasn't broken. She was calculating. The carriage ride to the opera house had been silent. Adrian sat across from her, checking his pocket watch as if she were an appointment he was late for. He smelled of expensive cologne and someone else's perfume. The combination made her stomach turn, but she kept her face smooth as porcelain. They had arrived separately in spirit long before they arrived separately in body. When the carriage door opened and Adrian stepped out first without offering his hand, Vivienne felt the shift. The coachman's eyes flickered with pity. She hated pity more than she hated her husband. Pity was what people gave to victims. She refused to be one. She descended alone, her skirts gathered in one gloved hand, and walked into the opera house like a queen entering a throne room. Heads turned, whispers started. She ignored them all. Inside, the Blackthorne box sat in prime position, third tier, center view, velvet curtains the color of old blood. Vivienne took her seat and opened her program with steady hands. Below, the orchestra tuned their instruments in discordant warm-up. It sounded like the world coming apart. Fitting. 15 minutes later, Adrian arrived, but not alone. The woman on his arm was stunning in the way that makes other women hate themselves. Celeste Moreau, a name that sounded like expensive wine and tasted like vinegar. She wore emeralds, Blackthorne emeralds, stones that had been in the family for 6 generations. Stones that by all rights and tradition should have been Vivienne's. The opera house went silent, not the peaceful silence of anticipation, the stunned silence of witnessing a public execution. Adrian walked past the Blackthorne box without even a courtesy nod. He escorted Celeste to a box 2 rows down, visible to everyone, impossible to ignore. He seated her with exaggerated care, brushing a kiss against her gloved hand. Celeste's laugh rang out, high, bright, deliberately loud. Around Vivienne, the air thickened with judgment and fascination. In the box to her left, Lady Pemberton leaned toward her husband, fan concealing her mouth, but not the venom in her eyes. In the box to her right, Lord Ashford, her own distant cousin, looked at her with something worse than pity. Satisfaction. As if her humiliation validated every doubt he'd ever had about her marriage. Vivienne did not move, did not blink, did not break. She simply opened her program and read about the evening's performance of Don Giovanni. How appropriate. An opera about a nobleman destroyed by his own appetites. The music began. Vivienne watched the stage, but her mind was 3 miles away in the east wing of Blackthorne Manor, where Adrian kept his private study, where he thought his secrets were locked behind mahogany and leather. He had no idea she'd been inside that room a dozen times in the past 2 months. He had no idea she'd found the ledgers. 2 rows below, Celeste leaned against Adrian's shoulder, her dark curls spilling across his jacket. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at Vivienne, before the wedding, before the title became more important than the woman who came with it. Vivienne had loved him once, truly, desperately, the kind of love that makes you stupid. She'd met him at her debut season 5 years ago. He was 28, already a duke after his father's sudden death from apoplexy. Handsome in that sharp-edged aristocratic way, dark hair, pale eyes, the kind of bone structure that belonged on Roman coins. He had danced with her 3 times that first night. 3 times. In a society where 2 dances meant interest and 3 meant intent, it had felt like fate. They married 4 months later in a ceremony so grand it made the scandal sheets for a week. For the first year, she thought she'd found something rare, a marriage built on more than contracts and bloodlines. Adrian had been attentive, intelligent. He'd asked her opinions on estate matters, invited her into discussions about investments and politics. She thought they were building something together. Then his mother died. The Dowager Duchess had been a force of nature, cold, exacting, and ruthlessly protective of the Blackthorne legacy. After her funeral, something in Adrian shifted. He stopped asking Vivienne's opinion, started spending more time in London, less at the estate, came home later, spoke less, touched her like an obligation instead of a desire. She told herself it was grief. Then came the rumors, a dancer at Covent Garden, an actress in Drury Lane, a widow in Bath. Vivienne ignored them. Rumors were currency in their world. You couldn't spend your life chasing shadows. But then came Celeste. Unlike the others, Celeste didn't hide. She attended events, wore gifts openly, smiled at Vivienne across crowded ballrooms like they were friends. That was 6 months ago. Tonight was the culmination. The final insult. On stage, Don Giovanni seduced another woman while his previous conquest plotted revenge. The irony was so thick Vivienne nearly laughed. During the intermission, the Blackthorne box became a theater of its own. People walked past slowly, stealing glances, measuring her reaction. Some nodded with cold sympathy. Others looked away entirely, as if humiliation were contagious. Vivienne remained seated, sipping champagne she didn't taste. Then Lady Ashford appeared at the curtain. Adrian's aunt, a woman who had never liked Vivienne, who had argued against the marriage from the start. Too lowborn, she'd said. No significant fortune. Poor breeding stock. Vivienne, dear. The older woman's voice dripped false concern. Are you quite well? Perhaps you'd prefer to leave early. No one would blame you. Vivienne set down her glass with deliberate care. I'm perfectly well, Aunt Charlotte. The performance is excellent. I wouldn't dream of missing the finale. Lady Ashford's lips thinned. As you wish. But do consider the family's reputation. Scandal reflects poorly on all of us. Translation: stop embarrassing the Blackthorne name by existing in public. Vivienne smiled. A smile she'd perfected over 5 years of aristocratic warfare. Sweet as sugar, sharp as glass. I assure you, Aunt Charlotte, I am thinking of nothing but the family's reputation. The older woman left in a rustle of disapproval. Below, Adrian and Celeste returned to their box. He fed her sugared almonds. She kissed his fingers. The display was so vulgar even the opera's protagonist would have blushed. But Vivienne wasn't watching them anymore. She was watching the man 3 boxes over, Colonel Richard Hastings, military liaison to the crown. A man whose shipping routes Adrian had been selling to the highest bidder for the past 18 months. Their eyes met across the theater. Vivienne inclined her head, just slightly, just enough. The colonel's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted. Recognition, confirmation. The message was sent. When the opera ended, Vivienne left before the final applause. She didn't wait for Adrian, didn't acknowledge the stares or whispers. She walked through the lobby with her head high and her heart cold. Outside, her carriage waited. Not the Blackthorne carriage with its ducal crest. Her own. Purchased with money from her modest inheritance. Maintained with funds Adrian didn't control. She'd learned early in the marriage to keep some things separate. The ride home took 30 minutes. Long enough to replay the evening, short enough that her anger didn't cool. Blackthorne Manor rose from the darkness like a monument to old money and older sins. Vivienne had hated it the first time she saw it. Too large, too cold. too full of portraits of dead people judging the living. She'd tried to make it a home. Failed. Now it was just a cage with expensive wallpaper. Margaret met her at the door, worry creasing her weathered face. "My lady." "Not tonight, Margaret." Vivienne handed over her cloak. "I need to be alone." She climbed the stairs to her private chambers, not the Duchess's suite she was supposed to occupy. Those rooms connected to Adrian's. She'd moved to the West Wing 2 years ago, claimed she needed better light for her correspondence. No one questioned it. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it. Only then did she allow herself to shake. Not from sadness, from rage. Pure, crystalline, incandescent rage. She crossed to her writing desk and pulled out the hidden drawer. Inside lay 6 months of work. Letters copied in her own hand. Ledgers transcribed during late nights when Adrian thought she was asleep. Testimonies from servants paid well enough to speak truth. Every piece of evidence pointing to one conclusion. Her husband was selling military intelligence to private investors. Men who profited from knowing which ships carried what cargo, which routes were protected, which weren't. It was treason dressed up as business, and Vivienne had proof. She discovered it by accident. A letter left carelessly on his desk. A name she recognized, Lord fucking Hartwell, a known profiteer who'd made a fortune during the war. She'd read the letter, then another, then another. At first, she'd planned to confront Adrian, beg him to stop before he destroyed them both. Then came the night he brought Celeste to a family dinner, introduced her as a dear family friend, sat her in Vivienne's seat. That night, something inside Vivienne died, the part that still loved him, the part that thought he might change, the part that believed in redemption. What replaced it was colder, sharper, more dangerous. If Adrian wanted to destroy himself, she would help him, but she would make sure she survived the fall. Over the following weeks, she became a ghost in her own home. Quiet, obedient, unremarkable. She attended events when required, smiled when expected, played the role of dutiful duchess with such perfection that even Adrian stopped noticing her, which meant he stopped being careful. He left documents unsealed, had conversations within earshot, trusted his staff too much. Vivienne collected it all. She also made friends, real ones, not the fair-weather aristocrats who smiled at dinners and gossiped at balls. She befriended Captain Morris, who managed the Blackthorne shipping interests, Mrs. Thorne, the head housekeeper who'd served the family for 30 years, Daniel Cross, Adrian's own secretary, a man whose loyalty could be bought if the price was right. She paid the price. Now, sitting in her chambers with evidence spread before her, Vivienne reviewed her plan one final time. Tomorrow, she would send the documents to Colonel Hastings, not as an accusation. As a concerned wife who'd stumbled upon troubling information and sought guidance from a trusted military official. The colonel would investigate. He'd find more. Adrian had been sloppy. Within a week, the crown would have enough to move. Vivienne folded the papers carefully and locked them away. A knock at her door made her freeze. "My lady," Margaret's voice, urgent. "The Duke has returned. He's asking for you." Vivienne's heart kicked against her ribs. Had he noticed something? Suspected? She smoothed her skirts and opened the door. "What does he want?" Margaret's expression was strange, pity mixed with disgust. "He's in his study. He says it's important." Vivienne descended the stairs slowly, giving herself time to breathe, to prepare. Adrian's study sat at the back of the manor, overlooking gardens Vivienne had once tried to restore. The door was ajar. Light spilled into the hallway. She pushed it open. Adrian sat behind his desk, still in his evening clothes, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked up when she entered. His face was flushed, his eyes glassy, drunk. "Vivienne." He gestured at the chair across from him. "Sit." She remained standing. "What do you want, Adrian?" He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "What do I want? That's rich, coming from you." She said nothing. He stood, swaying slightly. "You think I don't know? You think I don't see the way you look at me? Like I'm some kind of monster. You brought your mistress to the opera, Adrian. You wore our family emeralds on her neck. What exactly am I supposed to think?" He slammed the glass down. "Those emeralds are mine to do with as I please. This estate is mine. You are mine. Vivienne felt something settle inside her, cold and final. I was never yours, Adrian. I was a transaction, a womb you hoped would produce heirs. And when I didn't deliver fast enough, you found other amusements. His face darkened. Watch your tongue. Or what? You'll humiliate me further? You'll parade more women in front of London society? You've already done your worst. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. You forget your place. Vivienne looked down at his hand, then up at his face. Her voice came out quiet, deadly. No, Adrian, you forgot yours. She pulled free and walked out. Behind her, she heard glass shatter against the wall. Back in her chambers, Vivienne wrote 3 letters. The first to Colonel Hastings. Concerned wife, troubling documents. Please advise. The second to her solicitor, requesting a full accounting of her personal assets separate from the Blackthorne estate. The third to her brother in Cornwall. A warning. Stay away from London for the next month. She sealed them with wax and her personal seal. Not the Duchess's crest. Her own family mark. Tomorrow Margaret would post them discreetly. Tomorrow the wheels would begin turning. Tomorrow Adrian's world would start to crumble. But tonight, Vivienne stood at her window and looked out over the estate that had never felt like home. Somewhere in the darkness, a clock struck midnight. The performance was over. The real show was about to begin. 3 days later, Colonel Hastings responded. The letter arrived during breakfast. Adrian was still asleep, recovering from another night of excess. Vivienne opened it in her sitting room, heart hammering. Lady Vivienne, your concerns warrant immediate attention. I will call upon Blackthorne Manor Thursday afternoon to discuss the materials you referenced. Please ensure the Duke is available. Respectfully, Colonel R. Hastings. Thursday. 2 days away. Vivienne burned the letter and scattered the ashes in the garden. That afternoon, Celeste Moreau came to call. The audacity was breathtaking. Margaret announced her with barely concealed outrage. Miss Moreau to see you, my lady. Vivienne set down her embroidery. A piece she'd been working on for months, a scene of Icarus falling from the sky. She'd stitched his wings in gold thread, the sea below in deepest blue. Show her in. Celeste entered like she owned the room. She wore a day dress in French fashion, daringly low cut, vibrant crimson. The Blackthorne emeralds glittered at her throat. Lady Vivienne. Her accent was thick, deliberately exotic. How kind of you to receive me. Vivienne smiled. I don't recall having a choice. Celeste laughed. A sound like breaking crystal. I thought it time we spoke. Woman to woman. How civilized. The mistress circled the room, examining paintings and ornaments with the casual entitlement of someone planning to redecorate soon. You must know Adrian intends to divorce you. Vivienne's needle didn't pause. Does he? Of course, you've given him no sons, no heirs. What use is a duchess who cannot secure the line? The words were designed to wound. Vivienne had spent 3 years trying to conceive, had endured physicians and treatments and whispered judgments, had felt her body fail her month after month. But that pain was old, worn smooth by time. She looked up at Celeste, met those cold, calculating eyes. Tell me, Miss Moreau, when a man discards one wife for failing to produce heirs, what makes you think you'll fare any better? Celeste's smile faltered. Vivienne continued, voice pleasant as poison. You're beautiful, I'll grant you that. But beauty fades, and Adrian's attention span is shorter than his memory. How long do you think before he finds the next shiny thing? 6 months? A year? You're bitter. I'm realistic. You think you've won because he put jewels on your neck and paraded you at the opera. But you haven't won anything. You've just become the latest transaction in a very long ledger. Celeste's face hardened. You're pathetic, clinging to a title while your husband finds happiness elsewhere. Vivienne set down her embroidery, stood. Crossed to where Celeste stood beside the fireplace. Up close she could see the cracks, the powder covering imperfections, the desperation beneath the confidence. Happiness? Vivienne's voice dropped. You poor, foolish girl. Adrian isn't capable of happiness. He's capable of acquisition. And you, my dear, are just another thing he's acquired. The moment you bore him, he'll discard you like last season's fashion. Get out. Vivienne smiled. This is my home, Miss Moreau. You get out. For a moment, genuine hatred flashed across the other woman's face. Then she turned and swept from the room, emeralds flashing. Vivienne returned to her chair, picked up her needle. Her hands were steady. That evening, Adrian came home late. Again. He didn't speak to Vivienne, didn't acknowledge her existence. She preferred it that way. Thursday arrived cold and gray, perfect weather for endings. Colonel Hastings came at 2 o'clock. Vivienne received him in the formal drawing room. Adrian joined them, irritated at being summoned to his own home. "Hastings, what's this about?" The Duke poured himself brandy without offering any to his guest. "I'm quite busy." The colonel remained standing, stiff, military. "I've received some troubling information regarding your business dealings, Your Grace. Specifically, your shipping investments." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Vivienne saw his hand tighten on the glass. "My business dealings are private, not when they concern Crown interests." Hastings pulled out a folder. "I have documentation suggesting you've been selling intelligence about military shipping routes to private investors. Intelligence that could compromise national security." The room went very quiet. Adrian's face flushed. "That's absurd. Who would make such an accusation?" Hastings glanced at Vivienne. "Just briefly. Your wife brought the matter to my attention." Adrian turned on her, eyes blazing. "You!" Vivienne met his gaze. Didn't flinch. "I found letters in your study, Adrian. Letters from Lord Hartwell, from merchant companies. Payments that didn't match any legitimate business. I thought the colonel should know." "You went through my private correspondence?" "I'm your wife. This house is as much mine as yours." Adrian looked like he might strike her. The colonel stepped forward. "Your Grace, I must ask you to come with me to answer some questions. The investigation—" "There is no investigation." Adrian's voice rose. "This is my wife's jealous fantasy. She's bitter because I've found happiness elsewhere." Hastings remained unmoved. "Then you'll have no trouble explaining the discrepancies in your accounts." "Get out of my house. I'm afraid I can't do that." Adrian threw his glass. It shattered against the wall, brandy streaming down expensive wallpaper like blood. "I am a duke. I don't answer to mid-rank military bureaucrats. You answer to the crown, and the crown takes treason very seriously." The word hung in the air. Treason. Adrian's face went white. "You can't be serious." Hastings signaled to 2 men waiting in the hall. Men Vivienne hadn't seen arrive. Men in uniform. "Duke Adrian Blackthorne, you are hereby detained pending investigation into charges of selling military intelligence and conspiracy against the crown." "No." Adrian backed away. "No. This is madness. Vivienne, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake." Vivienne stood, smoothed her skirts. "I told them the truth, Adrian. That's all." The soldiers moved forward. Adrian tried to run. They caught him easily, held him as he struggled. "You bitch! You scheming bitch! I'll destroy you for this!" Vivienne walked toward him, slow, deliberate. She stopped just close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "You already tried to destroy me, husband. You failed." She turned to Colonel Hastings. "Will that be all, Colonel?" "For now, Lady Vivienne. We'll be in touch." They led Adrian out in chains. His screams echoed through the manor until the doors closed behind him. Then, silence. Vivienne stood in the empty drawing room, listened to her own breathing. Margaret appeared at the door. "My lady, are you—" "I'm fine, Margaret." But she wasn't. She was shaking again, not from fear, from release. 5 years of suffocation, of humiliation, of being invisible in her own life. Over. That night, Vivienne barely slept. Her mind churned through possibilities, consequences. What came next? Morning brought news. Adrian had been formally charged. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just what Vivienne provided. The investigation uncovered more. Payments hidden in offshore accounts. Letters to foreign contacts. A network of corruption that went far deeper than she'd imagined. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was a traitor. The scandal exploded across London like wildfire. Within days, every newspaper carried the story. Duke arrested for treason. Blackthorne fortune under investigation. Duchess exposes husband's crimes. Vivienne became infamous overnight. Some called her a hero, a patriot who put country before marriage. Others called her a traitor herself, a vindictive wife who destroyed her husband out of jealousy. She didn't care what they called her. She cared that he was in chains. 2 weeks after Adrian's arrest, Celeste Moreau tried to flee England. She made it as far as Dover before authorities intercepted her. In her luggage, they found jewels worth a fortune, Blackthorne jewels, stolen from the estate. She was arrested, tried for theft, and exiled. The emeralds were returned. Vivienne had them melted down and sold, used the money to establish a fund for war widows. The irony pleased her. A month later, she received word that Adrian's trial date was set. He would face a jury of his peers, men who'd once called him friend, who'd drunk his wine and praised his business acumen. Now they would decide if he lived or died. Vivienne was called to testify. She dressed in black, mourning colors. Not for Adrian, for the woman she'd been before she learned what marriage really cost. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with nobles and commoners alike. Everyone wanted to see the duchess who'd brought down a duke. Adrian sat in the defendant's box, thinner than she remembered, hollow-eyed, broken. When their eyes met, she felt nothing, no love, no hate, no satisfaction, just nothing. She testified for 2 hours, answered every question with calm precision, described finding the letters, copying the documents, realizing what they meant. The prosecution asked if she'd confronted her husband first. No. Why not? Because I knew he wouldn't stop, and I knew if I confronted him, he'd destroy the evidence and continue putting lives at risk. Did you love your husband, Lady Vivienne? Once. Very much. And now? Now I don't know who he is. I'm not sure I ever did. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Adrian's defense tried to paint her as vindictive, scorned, a woman whose jealousy drove her to fabricate evidence. But the evidence wasn't fabricated, and the jury knew it. 3 days later, they reached a verdict. Guilty. Adrian was stripped of his title, his lands, his fortune. Everything passed to the crown, which, in an unprecedented move, granted control of the Blackthorne estate to Vivienne, not as duchess, as herself. Lady Vivienne Ashford, a woman who'd lost everything and gained a kingdom. The night after the verdict, Vivienne stood in Adrian's former study. Her study now. She'd had all his things removed, burned most of them. The room smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. On the desk lay one letter, from Adrian. She'd debated whether to read it, decided she owed him that much. Or maybe she owed herself. Vivienne, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I was a fool. Worse, I was cruel. I took everything you gave me and treated it like currency to be spent. You were right. I don't know what happiness is. I only know acquisition, conquest, victory. But none of it meant anything. The title, the wealth, the women. None of it filled the void. I look back now and realize the only real thing I ever had was you. And I destroyed it. I deserve this. Everything that's coming. But you deserved better. I hope you find it. Adrian Vivienne read it twice. Then she fed it to the fire, watched the paper curl and blacken, watched his words turn to ash. She felt still nothing. Maybe one day she'd feel something again. Grief, anger, relief. But not tonight. Tonight she was just tired. Tired of being strong, of being brave, of being the woman everyone expected her to be. She wanted to be no one for a while. Just Vivienne, whoever that was. 6 months passed. Vivienne rebuilt the estate with ruthless efficiency, fired corrupt managers, hired competent ones, restored businesses Adrian had bled dry. The Blackthorne name, her name now, became synonymous with fair dealing and innovation. She funded schools for girls, established lending programs for widows starting businesses, created apprenticeships for young women in trades typically closed to them. London society didn't know what to make of her, a woman running an estate, making business decisions, attending parliamentary sessions, unheard of, scandalous, revolutionary. Vivienne didn't care what they thought. She'd stopped caring what anyone thought the night Adrian was arrested. Freedom, she discovered, tasted like indifference to other people's opinions. Then came the invitation, the final ball of the season, the event that marked the end of one social calendar and the beginning of another, hosted by the Queen herself. Attendance was not optional for someone of Vivienne's rank. She almost declined anyway, but Margaret convinced her otherwise. "You've rebuilt an empire, my lady. Show them what an empire looks like." So Vivienne commissioned a gown, silver silk that caught light like water, simple, elegant, devastating. No jewelry except a single diamond at her throat, not Blackthorne diamonds, her own, purchased with money she'd earned. The night of the ball, she dressed alone. No husband to wait for, no schedule to accommodate, just herself and time. The carriage ride to the palace felt longer than it was. Vivienne watched London pass outside the window, streets she'd walked as a new bride, shops she'd visited trying to make friends, parks where she'd sat alone wondering what was wrong with her. Nothing was wrong with her. Everything was wrong with the world that told her she was only valuable as someone's wife. The palace blazed with light. Vivienne entered alone, no announcement needed. Everyone knew who she was. The ballroom fell silent as she descended the stairs. Every eye turned, every conversation stopped. She'd expected whispers, judgment, the usual. What she got instead was something else. Respect. Men bowed deeper than protocol required. Women smiled with genuine warmth instead of false sympathy. The Queen herself approached. "Lady Vivienne," Her Majesty's voice carried across the room. "How wonderful to see you. I've been following your work with great interest." Vivienne sank into a perfect curtsy. "Your Majesty honors me." "No, my dear, you honor us. What you've done, rebuilding your estate, supporting women's education, it's exactly what this country needs." The Queen took her hand, raised her up, led her into the ballroom like an equal. The message was clear. Lady Vivienne Ashford had the crown's approval. Anyone who thought otherwise could adjust their expectations. The dancing began. Vivienne didn't lack for partners. Men who'd ignored her when she was just Adrian's wife now competed for her attention. She danced with viscounts and barons, with military officers and merchant princes. Each one wanted something: access, investment, connection. She gave them polite conversation and nothing else. Until, "May I?" She turned. A man she didn't recognize. Older, 50 perhaps. Kind eyes, weathered hands that spoke of real work, not just aristocratic leisure. "Lord Edmund Thorne." He bowed. "I manage timber interests in Scotland. Your reputation precedes you. Does it? They say you're the shrewdest investor in London, that you turn everything you touch to gold. They exaggerate. Do they?" He smiled. "I heard you turned a failing textile mill into the most profitable operation in the Midlands. In 6 months. 8 months. And it wasn't failing, it was mismanaged. There's a difference." He laughed. "A genuine sound, see? Shrewd." They danced. He didn't try to impress her, didn't posture or brag, just talked about his work, his challenges, his failures. It was refreshing. When the dance ended, he bowed again. "Thank you for the honor, Lady Vivienne. I hope we might speak again sometime, about business." "Only business?" He met her eyes. "Whatever you're comfortable with." She found herself smiling, a real smile, the first in a very long time. The ball continued until dawn. Vivienne stayed until the end, not because she had to, because she wanted to, because for the first time in 5 years she felt like she belonged somewhere, not as someone's wife, not as someone's property, just as herself. When she finally left, the sun was rising over London, pink and gold light spilling across ancient stones. A new day, a new season, a new life. In the carriage home, Vivienne closed her eyes, thought about Adrian locked away somewhere, probably still angry, still convinced he'd been wronged. She didn't hate him anymore, didn't love him either. He was just someone she used to know, someone who taught her the hardest lesson of all, that you can lose everything and still survive, that survival isn't the same as living, that living means choosing yourself, even when it costs everything, especially then. Back at Blackthorne Manor, her manor now, Margaret waited up. "You look happy, my lady." "Do I? You do." Vivienne climbed the stairs to her chambers, stood at the window looking out over the gardens. In the east, beyond the city, Dawn continued its slow advance. She thought about all the women trapped in marriages like hers, suffering in silence, believing they had no choice. She thought about the ones she'd helped, the businesses she'd funded, the schools she'd built. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something, and something was better than the nothing she'd had before. Vivienne undressed slowly, let the silver silk pool at her feet, stood in her shift looking at her reflection. 5 years ago, she'd been a girl who believed in fairy tales, who thought love conquered all, who trusted in happy endings. That girl was gone. In her place, a woman who knew the world was cruel, who understood power better than poetry, who'd learned that happy endings had to be built, not wished for. She was harder now, colder, but she was free, and freedom, real freedom, was worth every scar. Outside, a bird began to sing. Vivienne opened the window, let cool air wash over her. Somewhere in London, Adrian was waking in a cell, still furious, still broken, still blaming everyone but himself for his fall. Let him. His story was over. Hers was just beginning. But that beginning came with a question she couldn't yet answer. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "My lady." Margaret's voice, urgent. "There's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. He says—" She stopped. Vivienne turned. "What?" "He says he has information about Lord Hartwell's network. He says there are others. More men like the Duke. Men still operating." Vivienne's pulse quickened. "Who is he? He won't give his name. But he says you'll want to hear what he knows. Send him away." "My lady." "I said send him away. I'm done with revenge. Done with schemes. I want peace." Margaret hesitated. "He says Lord Hartwell is planning something. Something that could destroy everything you've built." The words landed like a punch. Vivienne closed her eyes, took a breath, felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders again. She could ignore this. Send the man away. Live her quiet life, build her businesses, find her peace. Or she could do what she'd always done. What she was good at. Fight. "Tell him I'll see him in 10 minutes. Margaret nodded and left. Vivienne dressed quickly. Simple day clothes, hair pinned back, battle armor disguised as ordinary life. When she descended to the drawing room, a man waited, thin, nervous, clerk's hands stained with ink. "Lady Vivienne." He bowed too deep. "Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. Make them count." He pulled out papers, ledgers, documents that looked terrifyingly familiar. Lord Hartwell didn't work alone. There's a whole network. Nobles selling information, profiting from war. They know the Duke was arrested. They're scared. They're covering their tracks. And they're planning to ruin you before you can expose them. They'll claim you fabricated evidence against your husband, that you're a vindictive woman who can't be trusted. They'll destroy your reputation, your businesses, everything. Vivienne felt ice settle in her stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because—" He met her eyes. "Because my sister works in your textile mill. You gave her a chance when no one else would. She has 3 children. She can feed them now. Because of you." He pushed the papers toward her. "I can't fight them. But you can." Vivienne looked at the documents, saw names she recognized, men she'd dined with, danced with, men who smiled to her face and plotted her destruction behind closed doors. She should have known, should have expected this. Men like that didn't go down quietly. They dragged everyone else down with them. She could walk away, disappear into quiet obscurity, let someone else fight this battle. Or she picked up the papers, felt their weight, felt the weight of every woman counting on her, every business she'd saved, every life she'd changed. "You said 5 minutes." She looked up at the clerk. "I'm going to need 5 hours. And coffee. Lots of coffee." He smiled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, my lady." Vivienne sat down at her desk, opened the first ledger, started reading. Outside, dawn gave way to morning, and in Blackthorne Manor, a woman who'd already lost everything, prepared to risk it all again. But this time she wasn't fighting for love, or marriage, or family. She was fighting for something bigger, for justice, for truth, for every woman who'd ever been told she didn't matter. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The coffee went cold 3 times before Vivienne finished reading. The clerk, his name was Thomas Webb, sat across from her in silence. Watching her face for reaction, she refused to give him. She'd learned that skill years ago, how to keep your expression smooth while your insides turned to ice. The ledgers painted a picture worse than anything she'd imagined. Lord Hartwell wasn't just selling shipping routes. He was running an entire syndicate. 8 men. All titled, all respected. They'd been profiteering off the war for years. Selling intelligence, manipulating supply chains, getting soldiers killed for profit margins. Adrian had been the newest member, the most careless, the one who got caught. Now the others were scared, and scared men did dangerous things. Vivienne set down the last page, looked at Thomas. These names. You're certain? My employer keeps meticulous records. He's Hartwell's accountant, has been for 15 years. And why is he giving these to me now? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Because Lord Hartwell ordered him to destroy them, to burn everything. My employer refused. He has a conscience. Barely. But enough. Where is he now? On a ship to Boston. Left 2 days ago. He's not coming back. Smart man. She stood, paced to the window. Dawn had fully broken now. The gardens looked peaceful, deceptive, like everything else in her life. Behind her, Thomas cleared his throat. Lady Vivienne, there's something else. Of course there was. They're meeting, tomorrow night. All of them. At Hartwell's estate in Hampshire. They're planning how to destroy you before you can move against them. Vivienne turned. How do you know this? I delivered the invitation. I work for Lord Hartwell's solicitor. They think I'm invisible. Servants always are. She studied him, really looked. He was younger than she'd first thought. Mid-20s, perhaps. Intelligent eyes, hands that shook slightly when he thought she wasn't watching. You're risking your life bringing this to me. Yes. Why? He met her gaze. Because you're the only person in London who's ever actually fought back. Everyone else just takes it. The corruption, the cruelty, they accept it as the way things are. His voice dropped. You didn't. Vivienne felt something shift in her chest. Not warmth exactly, something harder, more dangerous, purpose. She thought she was done fighting, thought she could rebuild her life in peace. But peace was a luxury women like her didn't get. Not while men like Hartwell existed. Tell me everything about this meeting. Thomas pulled out more papers. A floor plan of Hartwell's estate, guard rotations, guest lists. He'd come prepared, smart. They'll arrive after dark. 9 o'clock. Stay until dawn, probably. It's meant to look like a hunting party. Very respectable. Very innocent. How many guards? 12. Maybe 15. Hartwell's paranoid since your husband's arrest. Exits? Main entrance, servant's entrance, stable access, and he hesitated. And there's a tunnel. Old smuggler's route from the Napoleonic Wars runs from the wine cellar to the woods half a mile out. Hartwell uses it for discreet meetings. You've been inside, once, to deliver documents Hartwell didn't want sent through normal channels. Can you draw it? Thomas nodded, pulled out a fresh sheet, started sketching. Vivienne watched his hand move. Steady now, confident. You missed your calling, Thomas. You should have been a spy. He smiled, weak but genuine. Maybe in another life. The sketch took 20 minutes. When he finished, Vivienne studied it carefully. Memorized every turn, every detail. This meeting tomorrow night. What's the objective? They're going to fabricate evidence against you. Letters, forged documents, testimony from paid witnesses. They'll claim you coerced your husband into treason, that you're actually the mastermind behind everything. Her blood went cold. And then? Then they'll have you arrested, tried, convicted, probably executed for treason. All very legal, very proper. She laughed, couldn't help it. The sound came out bitter and sharp. So I saved England from a traitor, and their plan is to make me the traitor instead. Patriarchy at its finest. Thomas didn't laugh. Lady Vivienne, these men don't play fair. They'll destroy you, your reputation, your businesses, everything you've built. And they'll sleep soundly afterward because they genuinely believe they're protecting the natural order. The natural order. She'd heard that phrase her entire life. Used to justify why women couldn't own property, couldn't vote, couldn't exist as anything other than extensions of men. The natural order was just another way of saying we have power and you don't. Well, she was done accepting that. Vivienne turned back to Thomas. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Go to Colonel Hastings. Give him these documents. Tell him everything you told me. Make sure he understands the scope of this. Thomas nodded. And then? Then disappear. Get out of London. Go somewhere these men can't reach you. What about you? She smiled. No warmth in it. I'm going to that meeting. Thomas went pale. That's suicide. If they catch you, they won't. You can't know that. No. But I can prepare for it. After Thomas left, Vivienne spent 2 hours making arrangements. First, she wrote letters, detailed accounts of everything she knew, everything Thomas had told her, sealed them, gave them to Margaret with strict instructions. If I don't return by dawn, deliver these to Colonel Hastings, to my solicitor, to the Times. Margaret's face crumpled. My lady, please, don't do this. I have to. You've already won. You destroyed the Duke. You rebuilt everything. Why risk it? Because if I don't stop them now, they'll destroy everything anyway. Better to die fighting than live in fear. Margaret grabbed her hand, squeezed hard. You're the bravest woman I've ever known. Vivienne squeezed back. I'm the most terrified woman you've ever known. I'm just good at hiding it. Next, she went to her chambers, changed into riding clothes, dark colors, practical, the kind of outfit that wouldn't catch on branches or slow her down if she needed to run. She strapped a small knife to her thigh, hidden under her skirts, probably useless against trained guards, but it made her feel less helpless. Then she sat at her desk and wrote one more letter. To Adrian. Not because she owed him anything, because she needed to say things she'd never said, things she might not get another chance to say. Adrian, by the time you read this, I'll either have stopped the men who destroyed you, or I'll be dead. Strange how life works. 6 months ago, I wanted nothing more than to see you suffer. Now I'm risking everything to finish what your arrest started. Not for you, never for you, for every person damaged by men like Hartwell. Like you used to be. You taught me something valuable, though you never meant to. You taught me that survival isn't enough, that living quietly while evil thrives is just another form of death. I don't forgive you. I don't think I ever will, but I understand you better now. You were weak. And weakness in a world built on power is its own kind of poison. I won't be weak, not anymore. If I die tonight, at least I die on my feet. That's more than you can say. Vivienne, she sealed it, left it on the desk. Then she went downstairs and saddled her horse herself. The stable boy tried to help. She sent him away. Some things you had to do alone. The ride to Hampshire took 4 hours. Vivienne pushed her mare hard but not recklessly. She needed to arrive with enough time to scout the location, to find that tunnel Thomas mentioned, to prepare. The countryside rolled past in shades of green and gray, England at its most beautiful and most indifferent. Nature didn't care about human drama, didn't care who won or lost. She found that strangely comforting. Hartwell's estate appeared just before sunset, massive, ostentatious, the kind of wealth that came from generations of taking and never giving back. Vivienne dismounted a mile out, tied her horse in a copse of trees where it wouldn't be seen, covered the remaining distance on foot. The woods Thomas mentioned were dense, old-growth forests that probably predated the estate by centuries. She moved carefully, watching for guards, listening for sounds that didn't belong. It took 30 minutes to find the tunnel entrance, hidden behind a fallen oak, covered in moss and dead leaves. You'd never spot it unless you knew it was there. She cleared the entrance carefully. The tunnel mouth opened into darkness. Cold air drifted up. It smelled of earth and old stone and secrets. Vivienne lit a small lantern, the kind that wouldn't give off much light but enough to see by. Then she descended. The tunnel was narrow, built for one person at a time. The walls were rough stone. Water dripped somewhere ahead. Her footsteps echoed despite her attempts at silence. It stretched on forever, or maybe just 5 minutes. Hard to tell in the dark, with adrenaline making her heart race and her hands shake. Finally, stairs, leading up. She climbed slowly, testing each step. The last thing she needed was a rotted board giving way and announcing her presence. At the top, a door, locked from the other side. Of course. But old lock, old wood. Vivienne pulled out a hairpin, something else she'd learned during her marriage. How to pick simple locks. She'd started with her own jewelry box after Adrian began helping himself to her things. Progressed from there. Took her 3 minutes. The lock clicked. The door opened. Wine cellar. Exactly as Thomas described. Rows of dusty bottles. Stone walls. Another set of stairs leading up to what she assumed was the main house. Vivienne closed the tunnel door behind her, found a space between 2 wine racks where she could hide and still see the cellar entrance. Then she waited. Waiting was the worst part. Gave her brain too much time to think, to imagine everything that could go wrong. She focused on her breathing. In, out, steady. Footsteps overhead. Voices. Laughter. They were arriving. Time stretched. An hour. Maybe 2. Vivienne lost track. Then the cellar door opened. Light spilled down the stairs, followed by men. 8 of them, just as Thomas said. She recognized every face, had danced with half of them, had sat across dinner tables from the others. Lord Hartwell led them. Older than the rest. 60s, probably. Silver hair. Expensive clothes. The kind of man who'd never been told no in his entire life. Behind him, Lord Pemberton, Lady Pemberton's husband. The man who'd looked at Vivienne with satisfaction the night Adrian humiliated her. Then Lord Ashford, her own distant cousin. The family member who'd never thought she was good enough for a duke. The others she knew by reputation. Viscount something, Earl something else. Titles that meant power. Meant immunity. Not anymore. They settled around a table. Servant brought wine. Was dismissed immediately. Smart. Couldn't have witnesses for what they were planning. Hartwell raised his glass. Gentlemen, to survival. They drank. To the preservation of order, Pemberton added, and the elimination of threats. More drinking. Vivienne pressed herself deeper into shadow. Her knife felt small and useless against her thigh. Lord Ashford leaned forward. So we're agreed? We move against Lady Vivienne immediately? Hartwell nodded. The woman has become dangerous, bad enough she destroyed Blackthorne. Now she's being hailed as some kind of reformer, funding businesses, educating women, giving them ideas above their station. Ideas above their station. Vivienne's fingernails dug into her palms. Worse, Pemberton said, she has credibility now. The Queen herself endorsed her at the season ball. If she starts looking into our affairs, she won't get the chance. Hartwell pulled out papers. I've had these prepared. Letters in her handwriting. Well, forgeries of her handwriting, detailing how she manipulated Blackthorne into treason, how she orchestrated everything to seize his fortune. He spread them on the table. We have 3 witnesses prepared to testify they saw her coerce him, threaten him, force him into illegal dealings. Vivienne's breath caught. The lies were so elaborate, so convincing. And the courts will believe this? Another man, younger, Viscount Carrington. He sounded uncertain. Hartwell smiled. The courts will believe what we tell them to believe. We own half the judges in London. The other half are too scared to rule against us. What about Colonel Hastings? He investigated Blackthorne. He might... Hastings is military, not judicial. Once we have her arrested, he can't interfere. Pemberton leaned back, satisfied. How long until we can move? 2 days. I'm meeting with the magistrate tomorrow, signing the arrest warrant. By week's end, Lady Vivienne will be in chains. They drank to that, celebrated the destruction of a woman who dared to step outside her place. Vivienne felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Not fear, not anymore. Rage. Pure. Distilled. Lethal. These men had destroyed lives for profit, had sent soldiers to death for money, had protected each other while crushing anyone who threatened their power, and now they were planning to do it again. To her. She waited until they'd drunk more, until their voices got louder and their movements sloppier. Then she stepped out from the shadows. Good evening, gentlemen. The effect was instantaneous. Chairs scraped back. Wine spilled. Hartwell went white. Lady Vivienne, His voice came out strangled. How did you... Your tunnel needs better locks. She walked toward the table, slowly, letting them see she wasn't afraid. 8 men, 1 woman. But she'd learned something in the past year. Fear isn't about numbers. It's about who has more to lose. And these men had everything to lose. You've been listening. Pemberton found his voice first, recovering. You realize this changes nothing. You're trespassing. We can have you arrested right now. Go ahead, call your guards. Let's see how well they explain 8 lords meeting in secret to plot treason. This isn't treason, Hartwell snapped. This is justice. You're a threat to the natural order. The natural order. Vivienne laughed. You keep using that phrase like it means something sacred, like it's not just an excuse for men like you to do whatever you want without consequences. She pulled out papers, copies of the ledgers Thomas had given her, threw them on the table. I know what you've done, all of you. The profiteering, the corruption, the men who died so you could buy bigger estates and prettier mistresses. Hartwell's eyes went to the papers, then to her. Where did you get those? Does it matter? You can't prove anything. Those could be forgeries. They're not, and you know it, just like I know you're planning to forge evidence against me. Pin everything on a woman who dared to fight back. Ashford stood, voice shaking with rage. You're hysterical, delusional. This is exactly why women shouldn't be allowed... To what? Vivienne cut him off. To think? To act? To exist outside your control? She turned to face all of them. You're terrified of me. Not because I'm powerful. Because I refuse to be powerless. And that breaks your entire worldview. Silence. Then Hartwell smiled. Slow and cold. You're right. We are planning to destroy you. And we will. Because even if those ledgers are real, even if you have proof, it won't matter. We own the system. The judges, the magistrates, the crown prosecutors. He leaned forward. You're 1 woman. We're 8 of the most powerful men in England. Who do you think they'll believe? Vivienne met his gaze. You're right about one thing. I'm just 1 woman. She pulled out another paper, unfolded it. But I'm not alone anymore. The paper was a warrant, signed by Colonel Hastings, authorized by the Crown, for the arrest of Lord Edmund Hartwell and 7 co-conspirators for treason, corruption, and conspiracy against the realm. The color drained from Hartwell's face. That's not possible. We would have heard... You heard what I wanted you to hear. While you were planning to destroy me, I was building a case against you. Thomas Webb provided the financial records. Your own servants provided testimony. The colonel has been investigating for weeks. Pemberton lunged for her. She sidestepped. The knife was in her hand before she consciously decided to draw it. He stopped, stared at the blade. You wouldn't dare. Vivienne's voice came out flat. Cold. I would dare a lot of things. Turns out desperation is a great motivator. Footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets, then soldiers. Colonel Hastings at the front. He took in the scene. 8 panicked lords, 1 woman with a knife. Lady Vivienne. You couldn't have waited outside like we discussed and missed their faces when they realized they lost? Not a chance. Hastings almost smiled. Then his expression went hard. He turned to the men. Lord Edmund Hartwell, Viscount Pemberton, Lord Ashford, you are hereby arrested on charges of treason and conspiracy against the Crown. The room erupted, shouting, threats. Pemberton tried to run, was tackled by 2 soldiers before he made it 3 steps. Ashford grabbed Vivienne's arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. You bitch, you've destroyed us. Destroyed the family name. She twisted out of his grip, stepped back. I didn't destroy anything. You did. When you chose profit over principle. When you decided women were things to be used instead of people to be respected. A soldier pulled him away, shackled him. 1 by 1, they were all secured. All 8. Men who'd ruled England, who'd thought themselves untouchable. In chains. Hartwell was last. As the soldier approached him, he looked at Vivienne. This won't end it. There are others, men more powerful than us. They'll come for you eventually. Let them come. He laughed, bitter and broken. You've won a battle, not the war. Maybe. But I'll win that too, 1 battle at a time. The soldiers led them out, up the stairs, into the night where carriages waited to take them to prison. Vivienne stood alone in the wine cellar, surrounded by evidence of their conspiracy, of her victory. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. So fucking tired. Hastings returned, found her sitting on the floor, back against the wine racks, knife still in her hand. You all right? No, but I will be. He sat beside her, awkward in his uniform but trying. You did good work. Bringing down one corrupt duke is impressive. 8 is... He paused. Revolutionary. Or suicidal. Perhaps both. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Hastings spoke again. There will be a trial. Multiple trials, probably. The Crown will want your testimony. I know, and there will be backlash. People who think you've overstepped. Who believe women shouldn't... I know. Let them come. He looked at her. Really looked. You've changed. Since the night we arrested your husband. Have I? You're harder, colder. Vivienne thought about that. About the woman she used to be. The one who believed in love and happy endings. That woman was naive. She thought the world was fair, that justice existed naturally, that good people were rewarded and bad people punished. And now? Now I know better. The world isn't fair. Justice has to be taken, forced, built with blood and risk, an absolute refusal to back down. She looked at Hastings. So yes, I've changed, because the alternative was staying soft and getting crushed. He nodded, stood, offered his hand. She took it. Let him pull her up. Come on, let's get you home. The ride back to Blackthorne Manor took until dawn. Vivienne dozed in the carriage, half asleep, half aware, dreams mixing with memory. She saw Adrian in chains, saw Celeste fleeing, saw Hartwell's face when the soldiers arrived, saw herself, the woman she used to be, crying in empty rooms. That woman felt like a stranger now. When she arrived home, Margaret was waiting, rushed out before the carriage fully stopped. My lady. Thank God. I thought, I'm fine. Vivienne let herself be pulled into an embrace. It's over. Is it? For now. Inside, the manor felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves knew what she'd accomplished. Or maybe she was just delirious from lack of sleep. Margaret made her tea, forced her to drink it, then led her upstairs. You need to rest. I need to... Rest. Everything else can wait. Vivienne wanted to argue, but her body made the decision for her. She collapsed into bed, still fully dressed, asleep before her head hit the pillow. She dreamed of nothing, blessed, empty. Nothing. When she woke, it was late afternoon, sunlight streaming through windows, the sound of birds outside. For a moment, she forgot where she was, what had happened. Then it came back, all of it. She sat up, every muscle ached, her hands were scratched from the tunnel, her arm bruised where Ashford had grabbed her. But she was alive, and Hartwell's syndicate was destroyed. A knock at the door. Come in. Margaret entered, carrying more tea and a letter. This arrived an hour ago, from Colonel Hastings. Vivienne opened it. Lady Vivienne, the Crown wishes to formally recognize your service. All 8 men have been charged. Trials will proceed next month. Additionally, the Queen has requested your presence at court next week. She wishes to personally thank you. You've done England a great service. Respectfully, Colonel R. Hastings. Vivienne set the letter down. The Queen wanted to thank her, personally. 6 months ago, she'd been a humiliated wife no one cared about. Now she was... What? A hero? A revolutionary? A threat? Probably all 3. The next week was a blur of activity. Lawyers, depositions, testimony preparation. The trials were being fast-tracked. The Crown wanted this dealt with quickly before public opinion could solidify one way or another. Vivienne spent hours reviewing evidence, answering questions, preparing to face the men who'd tried to destroy her in a courtroom. Meanwhile, London society fractured. Half supported her, called her brave, a patriot, a woman who'd risked everything for England. The other half condemned her, called her vindictive, power-hungry, an unnatural woman who'd destroyed good men out of spite. The newspapers couldn't decide which narrative to run with, so they ran both. Vivienne ignored all of it. She'd learned that public opinion was fickle. Today's hero was tomorrow's villain. The only thing that mattered was what actually happened, what was true. And the truth was simple. 8 men had committed treason. She'd stopped them. Everything else was noise. The day of the Queen's audience arrived cold and clear. Vivienne dressed carefully. Not too ostentatious, not too plain, the balance of someone who understood power but didn't flaunt it. She wore deep blue. No jewelry except her family ring. The palace was even more intimidating in daylight. She was led through corridors lined with portraits of dead monarchs. Each one seemed to judge her, measure her, find her wanting, or maybe that was just her own fear talking. The Queen received her in a private sitting room, not the throne room, somewhere more intimate, more personal. Lady Vivienne, Her Majesty stood, an honor rarely given. Please, sit. Vivienne sat, tried to keep her hands from shaking. The Queen studied her with sharp, intelligent eyes. You've caused quite a stir. I apologize, Your Majesty. That wasn't my intention. Wasn't it? A small smile. You exposed 8 lords, brought down some of England's most powerful families. Surely you expected consequences. I expected resistance. I hoped for justice. And which did you get? Both. The Queen laughed. Genuine amusement. I like you, Lady Vivienne. You don't dissemble, don't play games. You simply act and let others sort out the politics. With respect, Your Majesty, I don't have the luxury of politics. Politics is what men play when they have power and time. I had neither, so you took them. I took what was necessary to survive. The Queen walked to the window, looked out over London. Do you know why I wanted to see you? To thank me. According to Colonel Hastings. That's part of it. But mostly, she turned back. I wanted to see if you were real, if you were truly the woman everyone's talking about, or if you were just another schemer playing a longer game, and I think you're dangerous, in the best possible way. Vivienne didn't know how to respond to that. The Queen continued, England is changing, slowly, painfully, but changing. Women like you are the reason. Women who refuse to accept the limitations men place on them. She sat back down. I can't publicly support everything you've done. The political ramifications would be too severe. But privately, I admire you, and I will do what I can to protect you from the backlash that's coming. Because it is coming. Vivienne knew. Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't thank me yet. The trials will be brutal. Those men have families, allies. They'll destroy you if they can, even from prison. I know, and you'll face them anyway. It wasn't a question. Yes, the Queen nodded, satisfied. Then I wish you luck, Lady Vivienne. And courage, though I suspect you have plenty of both. The audience ended. Vivienne left the palace feeling strange, validated and terrified in equal measure. The Queen believed in her, but belief wouldn't stop the knives coming in the dark. That night, back at Blackthorne Manor, Vivienne stood in Adrian's old study, her study now. On the desk lay the trial documents, evidence she'd be presenting, testimony she'd be giving. 8 trials. 8 chances for something to go wrong. She should have been scared. Part of her was. But a larger part was ready. She'd come too far to stop now, had sacrificed too much to back down. If they wanted to destroy her, they'd have to go through everything she'd built, every ally she'd made, every person she'd helped. She wasn't alone anymore. That made all the difference. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Margaret again. My lady, there's someone here to see you. Who? He says his name is Lord Edmund Thorne, the timber merchant from the ball, the one who'd danced with her, who'd talked about business and failure without pretense. Vivienne's pulse kicked up. Not fear, something else. Curiosity, maybe. Send him in. Thorne entered, still dressed practically, still carrying himself like a man who worked for his money rather than inherited it. Lady Vivienne. He bowed. I apologize for the late hour. I heard about... He gestured vaguely. Everything. I wanted to check if you were all right. I'm alive. That's not the same as all right. No, it's not. He shifted. Uncomfortable. May I speak plainly? Please, What you did was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever heard. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? I suppose not. Either way, you've made yourself a target. There are people who... He stopped, started again. I came to offer my support. Whatever you need, resources, connections, a place to hide if things go badly. Why? She genuinely wanted to know, because... He met her eyes. Because when I was starting out, I made enemies, powerful ones. They tried to destroy me. Would have succeeded if I hadn't had people willing to stand with me. She studied him, looking for the angle, the hidden motive, found none, just sincerity. Strange how rare that was. Thank you, Lord Thorne. Edmund, please. Edmund. They stood in silence, not awkward, just present. Then he spoke again. There's something else you should know. I've been hearing rumors about the families of the men you arrested. They're planning something. I don't know what, but I should be careful. More than careful. These aren't men bound by honor or law. They'll do whatever it takes. Vivienne felt the weight settle back onto her shoulders. Of course they would. Of course this wasn't over. It would never be over. Not until she was dead, or they were. That was the point of no return. The moment she realized there was no going back to normal, no quiet life, no peace, only forward, only fighting, only winning or dying. She looked at Edmund, this man who'd come to warn her, who'd offered help without asking for anything in return. Stay, have tea, tell me everything you've heard. He nodded. And as they sat in the study, her space, her hard-won territory, Vivienne felt something shift again. Not hope exactly, but not hopelessness either. Maybe survival wasn't about fighting alone. Maybe it was about finding people worth fighting alongside. People who saw you, really saw you, and stood with you anyway. That was power too. Different from the power Hartwell and his ilk wielded. Better. Stronger. More dangerous because it couldn't be bought or intimidated. Outside, night deepened. Inside, two people began planning for a war that hadn't officially started yet, but would, soon. And when it did, when the families came for her with everything they had, Vivienne would be ready. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had stopped being a reason to quit. Fear was just another thing to fight through. Edmund stayed until midnight. They talked strategy, contingencies, ways to protect her assets if things went sideways. He had a mind for logistics that reminded Vivienne of what she used to think Adrian possessed before she learned the difference between intelligence and cunning. When he finally left, he paused at the door. Be careful who you trust, Lady Vivienne. Even people who seem loyal have breaking points. She thought about that after he was gone. About loyalty. About how it was always conditional, always dependent on what people stood to gain or lose. She'd trusted Adrian once. Look how that ended. But she couldn't live in perpetual suspicion, couldn't function if she questioned everyone. So she chose carefully, trusted sparingly, and kept her eyes open. The trials began 2 weeks later. Lord Hartwell went first. Fitting. He was the architect. The others were just accomplices. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. Half of London wanted to see how this played out. Whether a woman could really bring down the old guard, or whether the system would protect its own like it always had. Vivienne sat in the witness section, spine straight, hands folded, face expressionless. She'd practiced that look. The one that gave nothing away, that made people uncertain about what she was thinking. Hartwell was brought in wearing chains. He'd lost weight. His expensive clothes hung loose. Prison had aged him a decade in 2 weeks. Their eyes met across the courtroom. His held pure hatred. Hers held nothing at all. The prosecution opened strong, laid out the evidence methodically, financial records, correspondence, testimony from Thomas Webb and others who'd worked inside the syndicate. Hartwell's defense tried to discredit it, called it forgery, conspiracy, the desperate acts of a vindictive woman. Then Vivienne was called to testify. She walked to the stand slowly. Let them all see her. Let them measure her against whatever image they'd built in their heads. The prosecutor was a man named Ellsworth. Mid-40s, sharp-featured. He'd reviewed her testimony a dozen times in preparation. Lady Vivienne, please tell the court how you first discovered Lord Hartwell's activities. She did. Calmly. Precisely. No emotion. Just facts. She described finding the letters in Adrian's study, recognizing the pattern, copying documents, building a case. The defense attorney, a man named Quincy, who looked like he ate nails for breakfast, stood for cross-examination. Lady Vivienne. His voice dripped skepticism. Isn't it true that you hated your husband? Yes. That took him off guard. He'd expected denial, deflection. You admit it? I hated what he'd become, what he'd done, both to me and to England. And isn't it true you wanted revenge? I wanted justice. Aren't they the same thing? No, revenge is personal. Justice serves everyone, Quincy sneered. How noble. And this justice just happened to result in you controlling your husband's entire fortune. The fortune was returned to the crown and then granted to me based on my management of the estate. I didn't steal it, I earned it, by destroying your husband, by stopping a traitor. The exchange went on for an hour. Quincy tried every angle, painted her as bitter, vindictive, a woman scorned who'd fabricated evidence. She didn't break, didn't waver. Every answer was calm, measured, true. When she finally stepped down, she saw something in the jury's faces. Not certainty, but doubt. Doubt about whether the defense's story made sense, about whether a woman could really be that calculating or whether she was simply telling the truth. Doubt was enough. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty. Lord Edmund Hartwell was convicted of treason, stripped of his title, sentenced to life imprisonment, 1 down, 7 to go. The next trials moved faster. The evidence was the same. The pattern established. One by one, they fell. Pemberton, guilty. Ashford, guilty. Viscount Carrington, guilty. Each conviction felt like vindication, like proof that the system could work, that power didn't always win. But with each victory, Vivienne felt something else growing, unease. It was too easy, too clean. Men like this didn't go down without a real fight. They had resources, connections, leverage. So where was it? She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped 3 weeks after the final conviction. Vivienne was in her study, reviewing accounts. The estate was thriving. Her businesses were expanding. Everything was exactly as it should be. Margaret knocked, entered without waiting for permission. Her face was white. My lady, there's been... She struggled for words. Colonel Hastings is here. With soldiers. Vivienne's blood went cold. Send him in. Hastings entered alone. He wouldn't meet her eyes. That told her everything. What's happened? He pulled out a document, set it on her desk like it might explode. New evidence has come to light. Regarding your role in the conspiracy. My role? She kept her voice level. I stopped the conspiracy. According to this, he gestured at the paper. You were part of it. That you and your husband worked together. That his arrest was staged to protect you. That's insane. There are letters. In your handwriting, discussing payments, routes, shipments, forgeries. Perhaps. But they're convincing. Dated before your husband's arrest. They suggest you were the real mastermind. Vivienne felt the room tilt, felt everything she'd built start to crumble. Who brought these forward? Hastings finally met her eyes. Your cousin, Lord Ashford. He claims he's been holding them, waiting to see if you'd confess on your own. Ashford, the man she'd helped convict, the family member who'd always hated her. Of course, this was his revenge from prison, his final move. These letters are fake. You know they're fake. What I know doesn't matter. The Crown Prosecutor has seen them. He's calling for your arrest. No, this isn't... She stood, paced. Her mind raced. I can prove they're forgeries, handwriting analysis, paper dating, something... We're already running those tests. But until they come back... He paused. I'm sorry, Lady Vivienne. I have to place you under arrest. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You can't be serious. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Not in this. Not anymore. He signaled the soldiers waiting outside. They entered. Professional, efficient, no brutality, but no gentleness either. One of them held out shackles. Vivienne stared at them, at the iron that was supposed to go around her wrists, around the wrists that had written the evidence that brought down 8 traitors. The irony was so sharp it cut. Is this necessary? Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Protocol. She held out her hands. The metal was cold, heavy. Margaret appeared at the door, saw what was happening, let out a sound like something dying. My lady! It's all right. Vivienne forced her voice steady. This is a mistake. It'll be sorted out. But she didn't believe that, and from Margaret's face neither did she. They led her out through the manor, through rooms she'd restored, past portraits she'd hung. Downstairs she'd climbed 1,000 times. Her home. Not anymore. Outside, a carriage waited. Not the kind for transporting ladies, the kind for transporting prisoners. She was helped inside. Hastings climbed in across from her. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward. Vivienne looked out the window as Blackthorne Manor disappeared behind trees. Everything she'd fought for, everything she'd built, gone in an instant. The ride to the detention facility took an hour, long enough for reality to settle in, for the full weight of her situation to crush down. Hastings sat across from her in miserable silence. Finally, he spoke. For what it's worth, I don't believe you're guilty. Then why are you doing this? Because if I don't, they'll remove me. Assign someone who will. At least this way I can try to protect you. Protect me? I'm in chains. You're not in a civilian prison. That's something. She laughed. Bitter and broken. Thank you for your mercy, Colonel. They arrived at a military facility outside London. Stone walls, iron gates. The kind of place people entered and didn't leave. Vivienne was processed like any other prisoner. Personal effects confiscated. Clothing exchanged for a plain dress. Hair unpinned and examined for weapons. The humiliation was designed to break you, to strip away dignity along with possessions. She endured it with her jaw clenched and her eyes forward. They put her in a cell, small, stone floor, single window, too high to reach. A cot, a bucket. This was her world now. The door slammed shut. The lock engaged. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Vivienne was completely alone. She sat on the cot, stared at the wall, tried to understand how this had happened. She'd been so careful, so meticulous. How had she missed forged letters? How had Ashford gotten access to her handwriting samples? To paper and ink that could pass initial inspection? Unless he'd had help. Someone with access to her desk, her study, her private spaces, someone inside the manor. The thought made her sick, but she forced herself to think it through logically. Who had opportunity? Who had motive? Margaret? Never. The woman had been loyal for years, had risked everything to help. The other servants? Possible, but most of them were new, hired after Adrian's arrest. They wouldn't have had time to gather what was needed, unless it wasn't recent, unless someone had been planning this for months, since before the trials even started. Someone who knew she'd win, who'd prepared contingencies, someone smart enough to play a long game. Her mind circled back to one person. No. She rejected the thought immediately, refused to entertain it, but it kept coming back. Edmund Thorne. The man who'd appeared out of nowhere after her triumph, who'd offered help, resources, who'd been at the manor multiple times, who'd had access to her study, who'd warned her about trusting people. Had that been confession disguised as advice? No. She was being paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere. Edmund had helped her, had stood with her when others ran. Unless that was the point, to get close, to earn trust, to position himself for this exact moment. She needed to stop, needed to think clearly instead of spiraling. But alone in a cell with nothing but time, clear thinking was impossible. Days passed. Vivienne lost count. 3, 4. Time became meaningless when every hour looked the same. She was given food, water, nothing else. No visitors, no news, no information about whether the handwriting analysis had been completed or what it showed, just silence and stone and the slow erosion of hope. On what might have been the 5th day, the cell door opened. Colonel Hastings entered. He looked worse than she felt. The analysis came back. Her heart stopped, started again too fast. And? The paper dates to the correct period. The ink matches samples from your desk. The handwriting... He paused. It's very good. Our experts can't definitively say it's not yours, but it's not mine. I believe you. But belief isn't evidence. So what happens now? Now you're formally charged, tried, probably convicted unless we can prove who forged them. How do I prove that from a cell? You don't. Your legal team does. What legal team? Everyone who'd have stood with me thinks I'm a traitor now. Hastings pulled out a letter. This arrived this morning. She took it, unfolded it with shaking hands. Lady Vivienne, I know you're innocent. I'm assembling a defense. Don't lose faith. Edmund Thorne. She stared at the words. Tried to find the trap, the angle. Couldn't. Either Edmund was genuine or he was playing a game so sophisticated she couldn't see the moves. He's been asking questions, Hastings said, investigating. He's convinced there's someone else involved. Someone we haven't identified. Who? He won't say. Not until he has proof. Vivienne folded the letter, handed it back. Tell him to be careful. Whoever did this is good at disappearing. I will. Hastings left. The door locked again, and Vivienne sat with the horrible uncertainty of not knowing who was enemy and who was ally. 2 more days passed, then the door opened again. But it wasn't Hastings. It was Thomas Webb, the clerk who'd brought her the original evidence, who'd started all of this. He looked different, less nervous, more confident. That should have been her first warning. Lady Vivienne, he smiled, didn't bow. How are you finding your accommodations? What are you doing here? Visiting. Making sure you're comfortable. Something in his tone made her skin crawl. Say what you came to say. He sat on the cot, right next to her, too close, invading space in a way that was deliberate, threatening. I wanted you to know, before the trial, before everything falls apart completely. Know what? That it was me. The world stopped. You. I forged the letters, used samples I'd been collecting for months. Your handwriting is quite distinctive, by the way. Very elegant. Her hands clenched into fists. Why? He laughed. Because you're not the only one who knows how to play the long game, my lady. You work for Hartwell. Worked. Past tense. He's in prison now, useless. But before he fell, he paid me very well to ensure that even if he went down, you'd come with him. This was his insurance policy. No, this was mine. Hartwell thought I was loyal. He was wrong. I'm loyal to whoever pays best. Right now, that's his family. They want you destroyed. Completely. Irrevocably. And you sold me out for money. I sold you out because you never even saw me. None of you did. I was furniture. A clerk. Invisible. She'd thought making him an ally would protect her. Instead, she'd handed her enemy the keys. You seemed so sincere, she said quietly. So genuine. When you came to me with the evidence, I am good at seeming. It's how people like me survive in a world run by people like you. He stood, adjusted his coat. The trial starts next week. I'll be there. Testifying against you, explaining how you coerced me, threatened my family, forced me to help you frame innocent men. They were traitors. Doesn't matter. By the time I'm done, you'll be the monster. I'll be the victim, and justice will finally look the way it's supposed to. He walked to the door, knocked once. It opened immediately. Before he left, he turned back. You taught me something, Lady Vivienne. You taught me that the system can be beaten, that the powerful can fall. I'm just applying that lesson better than you did. The door closed behind him, and Vivienne sat in the silence that followed, trying to process what had just happened. She'd been betrayed, completely, by someone she'd trusted, someone she'd thought she'd helped. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She'd become what Adrian was, someone who failed to see the knife until it was already in her back. Hours passed, maybe days. Time was meaningless again. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat and stared at the wall and tried to find a way out of this that didn't end with her execution. There wasn't one. Thomas had been too thorough, too careful. The forged letters would hold up under scrutiny because he'd had months to perfect them. His testimony would be believed because he'd played the role of conscience-stricken clerk perfectly, and she had nothing. No proof of innocence. No way to demonstrate the forgery. No allies who could reach her in time. She was going to die. The realization settled over her like ice water. After everything, after fighting so hard, after bringing down an entire syndicate of corruption, she was going to die for crimes she didn't commit. The cell door opened again. She didn't look up, didn't care who it was, until she heard his voice. Vivienne? Edmund. She raised her head slowly. He stood in the doorway. No guards visible behind him, which meant he'd bribed someone, had called in favors, had risked everything to be here. How did you... Don't ask questions. We don't have time. He crossed to her quickly, knelt so they were eye level. Thomas Webb. I know what he did. I know he's the forger. How? Because I've been tracking him since the night you were arrested, following his movements, his contacts. He got sloppy, celebrated too soon. She felt something flicker. Not hope. Too early for that. But possibility. Can you prove it? Not yet. But I'm close. I found his workshop, where he practiced your handwriting. There are samples, drafts, evidence. Then take it to Hastings. It's not enough. Not without the original materials, the paper, the ink. He destroyed most of it. I need more time. The trial starts next week, I know. So what do we do? He pulled something from his coat. A key. We run. She stared at it. At him. What? There's a guard change in 20 minutes. Window of 4 minutes where this corridor is unwatched. I have a carriage waiting. We can be out of London by dawn. That's insane. I'll be a fugitive, hunted. They'll use it as proof of guilt. They're going to convict you anyway. At least this way you're alive. And then what? I hide forever? Change my name? Abandon everything I built? You live, and we find proof, real proof, enough to exonerate you. Then you come back. His eyes were intense, desperate. Please, Vivienne, trust me, trust. The word that had destroyed her over and over. Trust Adrian. He'll be faithful. Wrong. Trust Thomas. He wants justice. Wrong. Trust Edmund. He's different. Was she wrong again? She searched his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the betrayal that was surely coming, found only desperation and something that looked almost like... No, she couldn't think about that. Couldn't afford to. If I run, I prove them right, that I'm guilty, that I'm a coward. If you stay, you die. And they win anyway. Her hands were shaking, her breath coming too fast. This was it. The moment that would define everything that came after. Stay and die with honor. Or run and maybe find a way to survive. What would the woman who'd confronted Hartwell in that wine cellar do? The woman who'd risked everything on a gamble? The cell door clanged somewhere distant. Guard change starting. Edmund stood, extended his hand. 4 minutes. She looked at his hand, at the key he still held, at the door that was closed but could be opened, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Because survival always won. Had to win. Because you couldn't fight from a grave. She took his hand, let him pull her up. He unlocked the cell. The door swung open silently. Well-oiled hinges. Someone had prepared this carefully. The corridor was empty. Stone walls, torches every 20 feet. 3 doors to pass. Then stairs. Then freedom. Or capture. Or death. They moved quickly. Edmund leading. Vivienne following. Her bare feet made no sound on cold stone. Her breath too loud in the silence. First door, second door, third. Footsteps ahead. Edmund yanked her into a side alcove, pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers. A guard walked past, humming something. Oblivious. Didn't even glance their direction. Gone. Edmund exhaled, looked down at her, their faces inches apart. Still trust me? Ask me when we're out. They ran for the stairs, made it up 3 flights without encountering anyone. The facility was undermanned tonight. Edmund's work, probably. More bribes. More favors called in. At the top, a door leading outside. He pushed it open carefully, checked, clear. They stepped into cold night air, stars overhead, the smell of grass and freedom. A carriage waited exactly where he'd promised. Small, nondescript, built for speed, not comfort. He helped her inside, climbed in after, knocked twice on the ceiling. The carriage lurched forward, and they were moving, actually escaping. Actually, shouts behind them. Someone had noticed, had raised the alarm. The driver whipped the horses faster. They careened through narrow streets, too fast for safety. Buildings blurred past. More shouts. Closer now. Vivienne looked back through the small window, saw riders, soldiers, gaining. We're not going to make it. Edmund didn't answer, just pulled her away from the window, positioned himself between her and danger. The carriage turned sharply. Vivienne slammed into the wall. Pain exploded in her shoulder. Another turn, this one even sharper. The pursuing horses, too big, too heavy, couldn't match it. Fell back. They burst through what felt like a gate. The sound of metal scraping metal. Then open road. Dark countryside. The horses stretched into full gallop. Behind them, London fell away. The facility. The cell. The trial that would have killed her. All of it shrinking into the past. They rode for an hour before slowing, before it felt safe to breathe. Vivienne sat back against the seat, her whole body shaking, delayed shock hitting all at once. Edmund watched her, said nothing, just waited for her to process. Finally she spoke. Where are we going? Scotland. I have property there. Remote. Defensible. We can hide while I finish gathering evidence. And if you can't find enough, then we keep running. France. America. Somewhere they can't reach. She closed her eyes, tried to understand what her life had become. A week ago, she was celebrated, powerful, respected. Now she was a fugitive, running in the dark with a man she barely knew. Everything she'd built abandoned behind her. The woman she'd been wouldn't recognize who she'd become. But that woman would be dead in a week. This woman, broken, desperate, running, was at least alive. That had to count for something. She opened her eyes, looked at Edmund. Why are you doing this? Really? He met her gaze, held it. Because you're the first person I've met in 10 years who actually fights, who doesn't just accept how things are, who refuses to bow. That's not an answer. He smiled, sad and genuine. Because I'm tired of watching good people lose. Just once I want to see one win. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his motives were pure, that this wasn't another elaborate setup. But trust had failed her too many times. So instead she just nodded, accepted the answer, saved belief for later, if there was a later. The carriage rolled on through the darkness, taking her further from everything she knew, everything she'd been, toward something unknown, something that might be salvation or might be just a slower death. Behind them, London continued without her. The trials would proceed. Her name would be dragged through the mud. History would be written by the men she'd tried to stop, and she would become what she'd never wanted to be. An exile, a fugitive, a woman who'd lost everything. But sitting in that carriage with dawn approaching and Scotland ahead, Vivienne felt something unexpected. Not defeat, not surrender. Something harder, colder. Determination. They'd taken her home, her reputation, her freedom. But they hadn't taken her will. And as long as she still had that, as long as she could still think and plan and fight, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. She looked at Edmund again. This man who'd thrown his own life away to save hers. Whether he was ally or enemy would be determined later. For now, he was what she had. And she would use whatever she had to survive, to find proof, to return, to finish what she'd started. Because men like Hartwell and Ashford and Thomas didn't get to win, didn't get to rewrite history, didn't get to crush her and move on. She wouldn't let them, even if it took years, even if it cost everything else. She would have justice, or she would have vengeance. And right now, running through the dark toward an uncertain future, she didn't particularly care which one came first. Scotland arrived in fragments of gray dawn and bitter wind. The landscape was brutal, all sharp rocks and endless moors that stretched toward mountains too distant to offer comfort. This was a place where softness died, where only the hardest things survived. Perfect. Edmund's estate sat on a cliff overlooking black water. The house was stone, old, built to withstand sieges and centuries, the kind of place that had seen violence and endured. They arrived as the sun broke over the eastern hills. Vivienne climbed out of the carriage on legs that barely held her. 3 days of running, of hiding in barns and abandoned cottages, of looking over her shoulder at every sound. She was exhausted down to her bones. Edmund helped her inside. The interior was sparse, functional, no portraits, no luxury, just thick walls and narrow windows and rooms that echoed. A woman appeared from the kitchen, older, hard-faced. She looked Vivienne over with the critical eye of someone who'd seen fugitives before. "This is Mrs. Kincaid," Edmund said. "She manages the property, doesn't ask questions." The woman nodded once. "You'll be wanting food and rest, both." Mrs. Kincaid left without another word. Edmund led Vivienne to a room on the second floor. Small bed, single window facing the moors, a basin for washing. "It's not what you're used to. It's perfect." She meant it. Luxury had gotten her nothing but enemies. This harsh simplicity felt honest. "Sleep. I'll wake you in a few hours. We need to plan." She wanted to argue, to stay awake and start fighting immediately. But her body made the choice for her. The moment she lay down, unconsciousness took her. She woke to afternoon light and the smell of something cooking. Her body ached everywhere. Muscles she'd forgotten existed screamed protest, but her mind was clearer, sharp, ready. She found Edmund in what passed for a study, maps spread across a table, documents stacked in careful piles. He looked up when she entered. "Better? Functional." "Good. Because we have work to do." He gestured to the documents. "I've been going through everything again, Thomas Webb's movements, his contacts. There's a pattern. Show me." She moved to the table, stood beside him, close enough to see the maps, to read the notes. He'd been tracking Thomas for weeks. Every meeting, every transaction. The clerk had been careless after her arrest. Confident. That confidence left traces. "Here." Edmund pointed to a mark on the London map. "This is a print shop in Southwark. Thomas visited 3 times in the months before your arrest. Always late at night. Always alone. You think that's where he forged the letters?" "I'm certain. The owner is a man named Graves, former counterfeiter. Got caught. Served time. Now he runs a legitimate business but takes special jobs for the right price. So we need Graves to testify. We need him alive first. Someone visited his shop 2 days after your escape. The place burned down that night. Graves barely got out. They're cleaning up, erasing evidence, but Graves survived. And he's angry. Angry enough to talk if we can reach him before they do." "Where is he?" Edmund hesitated. "That's the problem. He's hiding. Somewhere in London. And London is exactly where we can't go." Vivienne studied the map, thought through the impossibilities. When you've lost everything, impossible stops meaning much. You do what needs doing because the alternative is worse than death. Then we go to London. That's suicide. Every soldier in England is looking for you. Then we'll need to be very careful." Edmund stared at her, looking for doubt, for fear, finding neither. "You've changed since that first night at the opera, when you sat there watching your husband destroy himself. You were dignified then, controlled. Now you're desperate, dangerous. Whatever keeps me breathing." He nodded slowly. "Then we plan." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Edmund had contacts, people who owed him favors or needed what he could offer. He called them all in, arranged safe houses, forged travel papers, created identities that would hold up under casual scrutiny. Vivienne became Catherine Gray, widow from Edinburgh, traveling to London to settle her late husband's debts. The papers were good, detailed, complete with a fictional history that could withstand questions. Edmund became her brother, William Gray, timber merchant, protective, practical. The disguises came next. Vivienne's hair was cut shorter, dyed darker. Her clothes changed from silk to wool, rough fabric that marked her as working class, invisible. She studied herself in the mirror, barely recognized the woman staring back. That was the point. Mrs. Kincaid helped with the final touches, showed her how to walk differently, how to hold herself lower, smaller, how to look at the ground instead of meeting eyes. "You were a duchess," the older woman said. "You carried yourself like one. Now you're nobody. Act like it." Vivienne practiced until it felt natural, until she could pass through a crowd and leave no impression, no memory, erasure as survival. On the third night, they left for London. The journey took 4 days. They traveled in stages, stopping at coaching inns, sleeping in common rooms, surrounded by people who never looked twice at them. Each mile closer, Vivienne felt the tension build, felt the weight of what they were attempting. She was returning to the city that wanted her dead, walking back into the trap. But there was no other way. Graves had the proof. Without him, she stayed a fugitive forever. Her name destroyed, her work undone. That was unacceptable. They arrived in London after dark. The city sprawled before them, vast, dangerous, full of eyes that might recognize her despite the disguise. Edmund had arranged a room in Whitechapel, far from Mayfair, far from anyone who'd know her face. The lodgings were grim, one room above a tavern, thin walls, the smell of cooking grease and unwashed bodies, the sounds of the street loud even through closed windows. Vivienne had never been anywhere like it. She found it strangely liberating. Here, no one cared who she was. No one watched her for signs of weakness or opportunity. She was just another poor soul trying to survive. Edmund returned from scouting an hour later. His expression was dark. Graves is hiding in a rookery near the docks, a place called Devil's Acre. It's controlled by a gang, the Hooks. They don't talk to outsiders and they don't cooperate with authorities. How do we get to him? We buy our way in, or fight our way in. Neither is ideal. What about a third option? What? We offer them something they want more than money. Like what? Information. Protection. The Hooks operate in shadows because they have to, because the law crushes them when they're visible. But if someone powerful owed them a favor, you're not powerful anymore. You're a fugitive. Now. But if I'm exonerated, if I return to my position, I'll have influence again. Resources. That's worth more than gold to people who live on the margins. Edmund considered it. You're proposing a deal with criminals. I'm proposing an alliance with survivors. There's a difference. He smiled, grim but genuine. You really have changed. They spent the next day gathering intelligence, asking careful questions, learning the structure of the Hooks, who led them, what they valued, what they feared. The leader was a woman called Marrow. No one knew her real name. She'd run the Hooks for 15 years. Brutal when necessary, fair when possible. The kind of person who understood power in its rawest form. Getting an audience with her meant going into Devil's Acre unarmed, trusting that she'd hear them out before killing them. It was insane. It was also the only option. They went at dusk, when the light was bad and the streets were crowded, when two more faces wouldn't stand out. Devil's Acre lived up to its name. Narrow alleys, buildings that leaned against each other like drunks, the smell of rot and humanity packed too tight. People moved in the shadows, eyes watching, measuring. Vivienne kept her head down, her hand on the knife hidden in her sleeve. Not that it would help against a mob, but it made her feel less helpless. They were stopped 3 times by gang members. Each time, Edmund stated their business. They wanted to see Marrow. They had a proposition. Each time, they were passed up the chain. Finally, they were led to a building that looked abandoned. Inside, it was surprisingly organized, clean, even. A headquarters disguised as ruins. Marrow waited in what had once been a tavern. She sat on a chair that might as well have been a throne, surrounded by her people, all watching the strangers with suspicion. She was younger than Vivienne expected, mid-30s perhaps, scarred, hard, but intelligent eyes, the kind that missed nothing. You wanted to see me. Her voice was rough, smoke and violence. Talk. Vivienne stepped forward. Edmund tried to stop her. She shook him off. This had to come from her. My name is Catherine Gray. Marrow laughed. Cold, sharp. Your name is Vivienne Ashford, former duchess, current fugitive. Did you think we wouldn't recognize you despite the hair dye? Vivienne's blood went cold, but she didn't retreat. If you know who I am, you know what I'm accused of. Treason. Yes. Marrow leaned forward. You brought down 8 lords, quite the accomplishment. Why should I help you instead of turning you in for the reward? Because the reward is temporary. What I'm offering is permanent. Marrow gestured. Keep talking. You hide here because the system is against you. The law, the aristocracy. They'd crush you if they could reach you. But they can't because you're too smart, too careful. Flattery won't work. I'm not flattering. I'm stating facts. You've built something impressive, but it's limited. You can't expand, can't legitimize, can't protect your people outside these streets. And you can? If I'm exonerated, yes, I'll have resources, influence. I can create businesses that employ your people legally. I can buy properties, set up systems that let you operate openly. Marrow's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? Because I understand what it means to be pushed outside the system, to have the world decide you're worthless and act accordingly. I won't forget that, and I pay my debts. Silence. Marrow studied her, looking for the lie, the angle. Vivienne met her gaze. Steady, honest. Finally, Marrow spoke. You're either the bravest woman I've met or the stupidest. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? A smile flickered across Marrow's scarred face. Maybe. What do you need? A man named Graves, former counterfeiter. He's hiding somewhere in your territory. I need to talk to him. Graves. Marrow sat back. He's here, under my protection. Men came looking for him 3 days ago. We sent them away missing pieces they'll notice. Will you let me see him? Depends. Why do you need him? He has proof I was framed. Without it, I stay a fugitive. With it, I can fight back. Clear my name. Return to power. And if you fail, then you've lost nothing. A few days of shelter for 2 fugitives. But if I win, you gain an ally who remembers who helped when no one else would. Marrow looked at the people around her. Some nodded. Others shrugged. The decision was hers. She stood, walked toward Vivienne, stopped close enough that Vivienne could see every scar, every mark of survival. You've got spine. I'll give you that. Most aristocrats would rather die than step foot here, let alone ask for help. I'm not most aristocrats. No, you're not. Marrow extended her hand. You've got 3 days. If you can't prove your case by then, you're gone. And if anyone traces you here, this conversation never happened. Vivienne took her hand, gripped hard. Understood. Graves was brought up from whatever cellar they'd hidden him in. He was a mess, burned on one arm, half his hair singed away, eyes wild with fear and anger. When he saw Vivienne, he nearly bolted. Edmund blocked his path, gentle but firm. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to stop the people who tried to kill you. Graves looked between them, suspicious, trapped. Why should I believe you? Vivienne stepped forward. Because we're the only ones who want the same thing you do, justice. And because I can give you something the people who burned your shop never will. What? A future where you're not running, where you can work without looking over your shoulder. Pretty words, true words, but I need your help first. She explained what she needed. Testimony, evidence, anything that connected Thomas Webb to the forged letters. Graves listened, his expression shifting from fear to calculation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. I can do better than testimony. I kept copies. Copies. Every job I do, I keep records. Insurance, in case clients try to cut me loose, or worse. Webb commissioned those letters. I have the originals of his drafts, his practice sheets, everything. Vivienne's heart slammed against her ribs. Where? Hidden. Safe deposit box at a private bank. But getting them means going into the financial district. In daylight. Where people will recognize you. Let me worry about that. Can you access them? With the right papers. The right bribe. Yes. Edmund looked at Vivienne. This is risky. One wrong move. I know, but it's the only move we have. They spent that night planning. Graves would retrieve the documents during business hours. Less suspicious than night. Edmund would accompany him. Provide protection. Run interference. Vivienne would wait. Hidden. Ready to run if things went wrong. She hated it. Hated being sidelined while others took the risk. But she was too recognizable. Too wanted. Her presence would doom the mission before it started. So she waited. In a rookery surrounded by criminals who'd shown her more loyalty than most of London's elite. The hours crawled. Dawn came. Gray and cold. Typical London. Edmund and Graves left at 9, dressed as clerks, carrying papers that said they were settling an estate. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. Vivienne paced the small room they'd been given, wore a path in the dirty floor. Marrow came to check on her around noon. "You'll wear a hole through the boards. Can't help it." The older woman leaned against the doorframe. "What you're doing? Going back against impossible odds. It's stupid." "I know, so why do it?" Vivienne stopped pacing, looked at her. "Because if I don't, they win. They get to rewrite history, get to pretend I'm the villain and they're the heroes, get to crush anyone who fights back and call it justice." She felt the words rising from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd kept locked away. "I survived a marriage that tried to erase me, survived humiliation designed to break me, survived betrayal by people I trusted. If I run now, if I hide forever, then all of that was for nothing." Marrow nodded slowly. "You're not fighting for yourself anymore." "No. I'm fighting for everyone who gets told they don't matter, who gets pushed down and expected to stay there. I'm fighting because someone has to prove it's possible to win. And if you lose, then at least I went down swinging." Marrow smiled, respect in her eyes. "You belong here more than you belong in Mayfair." Vivienne laughed, bitter but real. "Maybe so." Edmund and Graves returned as the sun was setting. Edmund's face was pale. Graves clutched a leather portfolio like it contained salvation. "It did. We got them." Edmund's voice shook slightly. Every document, every draft. Graves had copies of everything. Vivienne took the portfolio, opened it with shaking hands. Inside were pages covered in Thomas Webb's handwriting, practice sheets where he'd copied her signature over and over, early drafts of the forged letters with corrections noted, materials lists, payment records. It was everything. Proof beyond doubt that Thomas had forged the documents, that she'd been framed. She looked up at Graves. "This will hold up in court?" "Better than that. I documented dates, times. Webb didn't know I was keeping records. Every meeting we had, I wrote down afterward. Those notes are in there too." "Why did you keep such detailed records?" Graves shrugged. "In my line of work, you trust no one. Everyone's a potential threat. I learned early that documentation is the only insurance that matters." Vivienne wanted to hug him, wanted to laugh or cry or both. Instead, she just nodded. "Thank you." "Now what?" Edmund asked. "Now we take this to someone who can use it, someone with power and credibility. Hastings. If he'll see us." "He will." Edmund sounded certain. "He's been investigating since you escaped, looking for proof you were framed. This is what he needs. Then we go to him. Tonight." "Vivienne?" "Tonight. Before they realize we have this. Before they can destroy it or discredit it. We move now or we lose our chance." Edmund looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw her expression, saw the determination that had carried her through everything else. He nodded. "Tonight." They left Devil's Acre after full dark. Marrow provided escorts to the edge of her territory, protection until they reached safer streets. At the boundary, she stopped Vivienne one last time. "If you win, remember what you promised. I will. And if you don't win..." Marrow paused. "Well, at least you tried. That's more than most." They gripped hands, two women from different worlds who understood the same truth. That power respected strength, and strength came from refusing to stay down. The ride to Hastings' residence took an hour, long enough for doubt to creep in, long enough to imagine everything that could go wrong. But Vivienne pushed it aside. Doubt was a luxury. She needed clarity. Hastings lived in a townhouse near Westminster, military, organized, lights burning despite the late hour. They approached the servants' entrance, less visible. Edmund knocked in a pattern, some kind of signal. A man answered. "Hastings' aide." He recognized Edmund. His eyes went wide when he saw Vivienne. "Don't speak. Don't react. Just take us to the colonel." The aide hesitated, then nodded. They were led through back corridors, away from windows, into a study where Hastings sat reviewing documents. He looked up when they entered, froze. "Lady Vivienne," his voice came out strangled. You escaped." "I came back." She set the portfolio on his desk. "Because I have proof, real proof, that I was framed." Hastings stared at the portfolio, then at her, then at Edmund. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Coming here? If anyone sees you, then we'd better work fast." She opened the portfolio, spread the documents across his desk, showed him everything, the practice sheets, the drafts, Graves' testimony, the timeline that proved Thomas Webb had forged the letters months before her arrest. Hastings read in silence, his expression shifting from shock to rage to grim satisfaction. When he finished, he looked up at her. "This is enough, more than enough. We can overturn the charges, clear your name." "How long?" "If I move fast, 2 days, maybe 3. Too long. They'll know I'm back. They'll try to stop us. Then we protect you until the hearing. Military custody. Full guard." "No. If I'm in custody, they can still get to me. Accidents happen. I need to disappear until the moment we walk into that courtroom." "Where will you go?" She looked at Edmund. "Back to Devil's Acre. Marrow will hide us until it's time. You're trusting criminals with your life. I'm trusting survivors. They understand stakes better than most." Hastings considered, then nodded. 2 days. Stay hidden. Don't contact anyone. I'll send word when it's time." "What about Thomas Webb? Will you arrest him?" "Not yet. If we move on him now, he'll run. Or worse, he'll tip off whoever else is involved. Better to let him think he's won. Then crush him in open court." Vivienne felt something cold settle in her chest, the anticipation of watching her betrayer fall. 2 days. We'll be ready. They left the way they came, silent, quick, shadows moving through a city that wanted them dead. Back in Devil's Acre, Marrow received them with a nod. 2 days. You'll have them. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The real fight hasn't started. She was right. The next 48 hours were the longest of Vivienne's life. Every sound made her jump. Every footstep outside the door might be soldiers, assassins, the end. But Marrow's people were good. They kept watch, rotated guards, made sure no one came close who shouldn't. Edmund stayed with her. They barely spoke. What was there to say? Everything came down to the hearing. If Hastings could get the documents admitted, if the judge would consider them, if the truth would be enough. Too many ifs. On the second night, Edmund broke the silence. If this doesn't work, it has to work. But if it doesn't, if they refuse to hear the evidence, what then? Vivienne looked at him. This man who'd risked everything for her, who'd stood beside her when everyone else ran. Then we disappear. Forever. And they win. I won't let that happen. You might not have a choice. He moved closer, took her hand, his grip warm against her cold fingers. I've made my choice. Whatever happens, I'm with you. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that someone could stand with her without breaking, without betraying. But trust was something she'd have to learn again, slowly, carefully. For now, she just held his hand. Let herself have that one moment of connection. Tomorrow would bring the fight. Tonight, she could rest. The message came at dawn. Hastings' aid, delivered by one of Marrow's people. Today, 10 o'clock. Crown Court. Be ready. This was it. Vivienne dressed carefully, the best clothes Marrow could provide. Not fine, but respectable. She needed to look like someone worth listening to. Her hands shook as she fastened the buttons. Edmund steadied them, looked into her eyes. You've survived everything they've thrown at you. This is just one more thing. This is everything. Then we'll win everything. She wanted to believe that. Wanted to feel the confidence he projected. Instead, she just felt terrified. But terror had never stopped her before. They left Devil's Acre surrounded by Marrow's people, protection until they reached the court. The woman herself walked alongside Vivienne. You've got this. Marrow's voice was low, hard. They think you're broken. Show them you're not. Vivienne nodded. Words failed her. At the court boundary, Marrow's people fell back, couldn't go further without causing problems. Marrow gripped Vivienne's shoulder. Once. Hard. Then she was gone, and Vivienne walked toward the courthouse, Edmund on one side, Hastings waiting at the entrance. The colonel looked grim. Lady Vivienne. Lord Thorne. This way. He led them through side doors, avoiding the main entrance where reporters and spectators crowded. Inside, the halls echoed, marble and authority, the weight of law and power pressing down. They entered a courtroom already packed with people, and there, sitting in the defendant's box, Thomas Webb. He saw her. His face went white, then red, rage and fear warring for control. Vivienne met his eyes, held his gaze, smiled, not friendly, not forgiving, predatory. The judge entered, an older man named Whitmore, known for being fair, incorruptible. This was as good a venue as they'd get. The hearing was called to order. Hastings stood. Your Honor, new evidence has come to light in the case against Lady Vivienne Ashford, evidence that proves beyond doubt she was framed. We request the charges be dismissed and that new charges be filed against the true perpetrator. Whitmore looked skeptical. This is highly irregular, Colonel. Lady Ashford is a fugitive, who returned to face her accusers, to present proof of her innocence. We ask that you examine the evidence before making any judgments. The judge considered, then nodded. Present your evidence. Hastings called Graves to the stand. The forger testified for an hour, detailed everything, how Thomas approached him, what he'd been paid to forge, the practice sheets, the timeline. He produced every document, every draft, every piece of proof. Thomas's attorney tried to discredit him, called him a criminal, unreliable. Graves didn't flinch. I am a criminal. That's why I know how to document my crimes. These records are insurance, and they're real. The documents were examined, verified, compared to the forged letters. The handwriting matched, the dates aligned. The paper came from the same source. It was irrefutable. Whitmore looked at Thomas. Do you have anything to say? The clerk's face was a mask of rage and desperation. She's a traitor. She destroyed good men. She deserved... That's not what I asked. Did you forge these documents? Silence. Then, barely audible. Yes. The courtroom erupted. Whitmore slammed his gavel. Order! Order! When the noise died, he turned to Vivienne. Lady Ashford, please stand. She did, legs shaking but holding. The charges against you are dismissed. You are free. And you have the court's apology for the injustice you've suffered. Relief crashed over her, so intense she almost collapsed. Edmund caught her arm, steadied her. Furthermore, Whitmore continued, I'm issuing a warrant for the arrest of anyone who conspired with Mr. Webb in this matter. This conspiracy will be investigated fully. He looked at Thomas. Who gave you the orders? Who paid you? Thomas's mouth opened, closed. He looked terrified. Then he spoke. A whisper that carried through the silent courtroom. Lord Ashford and 7 others. The families of the men she destroyed. They wanted revenge. Vivienne felt vindication surge through her veins. They'd tried to crush her, used the system against her, turned law into a weapon, and she'd beaten them anyway. The hearing ended in chaos. Reporters shouting questions, people rushing to her, demanding statements. Hastings and Edmund got her out quickly, through back corridors, into a carriage, away from the madness. Inside the carriage, Vivienne finally let herself feel it. The victory, the relief, the exhaustion. She'd won, against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against a system designed to protect men like them. She'd won. Edmund took her hand. You did it. We did it. No, this was you, your courage, your refusal to quit. She looked at him. Really looked. Saw the man who'd stood with her, who'd risked everything, who'd never betrayed her. Maybe trust wasn't dead after all. Maybe... The carriage lurched to a stop, too sudden, too violent. Edmund looked out. His face went pale. What? Soldiers, surrounding us. But the charges were dismissed. Not crowned soldiers. Private guards. And they're not here on legal authority. Vivienne looked out the window, saw 20 armed men, saw their formation, professional, military, saw the man leading them. Lord Pemberton, one of the convicted traitors. supposedly in prison. How was he? He smiled at her through the window, cold, vicious. Then he raised his hand. The guards raised weapons, and Vivienne realized with absolute clarity, the battle wasn't over. Time slowed to the speed of heartbeats. Vivienne watched Pemberton's hand hover in the air, watched the guards tighten their grips on weapons that would tear through the carriage like paper, watched her own death crystallize in the space between one breath and the next. She'd survived everything. Betrayal, imprisonment, flight, return, victory, only to die here, in a London street, surrounded by the same corruption she'd spent a year fighting. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so brutal. Edmund moved, fast. He threw himself against the carriage door, shoulder first. The wood splintered but held, not fast enough. Pemberton's hand dropped. The world exploded. Glass shattered, wood cracked, the air filled with the smell of gunpowder and blood. But the shots went high. Over the carriage, over their heads. Someone had tackled the front line of guards. Bodies crashed into cobblestones. Weapons clattered away. More bodies. More chaos. A wave of people flooding the street from alleys and doorways. Marrow's people. The gang leader herself appeared at the carriage window. Her scarred face split in a vicious grin. Told you I'd protect you for 2 days. Didn't say what I'd do after. She yanked the door open. Get out, now. Vivienne didn't argue. She grabbed Edmund's hand and they ran. Behind them, Devil's Acre fought the private guards with brutal efficiency. No rules, no mercy, just survival tactics honed over decades of living outside the law. Pemberton screamed orders, tried to rally his men, but they were trained for battlefields, not street warfare, not fighting ghosts who knew every shadow and shortcut. Marrow led them through passages too narrow for pursuit, over walls, through buildings. A maze only locals could navigate. They emerged 3 blocks away, breathing hard. Alive. How did you know? Vivienne gasped out the words. I didn't trust the hearing. Marrow's voice was cold, hard. Men like Pemberton don't accept loss. They burn everything down first. So I kept people watching. When his guards moved, we moved faster. You saved our lives. You're under my protection. That means something here. Vivienne looked at this woman, this criminal who understood honor better than most nobles. Thank you. Save it. We're not clear yet. Pemberton will regroup. He's got resources, and he's desperate. Desperate men are the most dangerous kind. Where do we go? Marrow considered. Not Devil's Acre. He knows about it now. You need somewhere he can't reach, somewhere with real power behind it. The palace. Edmund said it. Both women turned to look at him. The Queen supported you publicly. If we get you to the palace, claim sanctuary, Pemberton can't touch you without declaring war on the crown itself. He's already declared war on the crown by breaking out of prison. Exactly. So we make it official. Force the crown to respond. Marrow nodded slowly. It could work. But getting there means crossing half of London, through checkpoints, past soldiers, with every eye looking for you. Then we don't hide. Vivienne felt something settle inside her, that cold clarity that came when there were no good options, only necessary ones. We go public, loud, make it impossible for Pemberton to kill me quietly. You're talking about turning yourself into a spectacle. I'm talking about survival. If enough people see me alive and testifying about what happened, killing me becomes political suicide, even for him. The 3 of them stood in the alley, making a plan that was half desperation and half genius. Finally, Marrow spoke. I can get you to the main roads. After that, you're on your own. My people can't operate in daylight that open. That's enough. Vivienne turned to Edmund. We need to get word to Hastings. Tell him what's happening. Make sure he's ready to back us. Already done. Edmund pulled out a small notebook, wrote quickly, tore out the page, handed it to one of Marrow's people. Get this to Colonel Hastings. Fast. The messenger vanished into the maze of alleys. Now we move. They walked through London like an army of 3. Marrow's people shadowed them from rooftops and side streets, invisible but present, a ghost guard that melted away as they reached busier areas. At the edge of Mayfair, Marrow stopped. This is as far as I go. She looked at Vivienne. You've got courage, more than most. Use it. I will. And when you're back in power, when you've got your estate and your influence and all that pretty legitimacy, I'll remember. Vivienne met her eyes. I told you, I pay my debts. Marrow nodded once. Then she was gone, disappeared into the city like smoke. Edmund and Vivienne continued alone. They walked openly now, through streets filled with morning traffic, past shops and houses and people going about ordinary lives, people who had no idea what was happening in the shadows of their city. Vivienne kept her chin up, her stride steady. If she was going to be seen, she'd be seen on her terms. Not cowering, not hiding. Whispers started almost immediately. Isn't that Lady Vivienne, the duchess who was arrested? She's supposed to be in custody. The murmurs spread like fire. People stopped, stared, some with curiosity, some with hostility, most with simple shock. A woman who'd been declared a traitor walking free through London. It was scandalous, impossible, fascinating, exactly what Vivienne needed. A journalist appeared from nowhere. Young, hungry for a story. Lady Vivienne, is it true the charges were dismissed? Yes. And you're walking free? I was never guilty. The evidence proved it. Now I'm going to see Her Majesty. The journalist scribbled frantically. What about the reports that Lord Pemberton escaped prison? If he did, that's treason. The Crown will deal with him accordingly. Are you afraid for your life? Vivienne stopped, looked directly at the journalist, at the crowd gathering around them. I've been afraid for months. Fear doesn't change reality. Lord Pemberton and men like him tried to destroy me because I exposed their corruption. They failed. And they'll keep failing, because the truth is stronger than their lies. The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others looked uncertain. But they were listening. That was enough. She continued walking. The journalist followed. Others joined, a procession forming around her. By the time they reached the palace gates, she had 50 people trailing behind her. Witnesses. Protection through visibility. The guards at the gate looked panicked. Lady Vivienne Ashford approaching with a mob wasn't in any protocol manual. One stepped forward, uncertain. Lady Ashford, you can't... I request an audience with Her Majesty. Vivienne's voice carried. Clear, commanding. I have information regarding an escaped prisoner and a threat to the Crown. The guard hesitated. Then he signaled another guard, who disappeared inside. They waited, the crowd behind them growing. Word spreading through London that the scandalous Duchess had returned and was demanding to see the Queen. It was theater, pure spectacle, the kind of thing that would be talked about for years, which meant Pemberton couldn't kill her without it being the most public assassination in English history. Checkmate. The guard returned, pale, nervous. Her Majesty will see you, you and Lord Thorne only. The crowd behind them erupted in excited chatter. Vivienne turned to address them. Thank you for bearing witness. Whatever happens next, you've all helped ensure the truth survives. Then she and Edmund were escorted inside. Through corridors she'd walked once before, when she'd been celebrated, before everything fell apart. Now she was here again, broken, rebuilt, harder. The Queen received them in the same private sitting room as before. She looked older, tired, the weight of ruling visible in every line of her face. Lady Vivienne, her voice was dry. I hear you've been causing quite a commotion. Apologies, Your Majesty, but it was necessary. So I'm told. The Queen gestured for them to sit. Colonel Hastings has briefed me. Lord Pemberton's escape. His attempt on your life. The conspiracy continues even after conviction. Yes, Your Majesty, and you've come here seeking what? Protection? Justice? Revenge? All three. But mostly I came to ensure that what I expose doesn't get buried, that the reforms I started don't die with me. The Queen studied her. You've changed since we last spoke. You were determined then. Now you're something else. Harder. Surviving will do that. Indeed. The Queen stood, walked to the window, looked out over London. You've become a symbol, Lady Vivienne. Women across England see you as proof that fighting back is possible, that the system can be challenged. Is that a problem? It could be. Symbols are dangerous. They inspire people to question everything, to demand change. She turned back. But they're also necessary. Stagnant systems rot from within. You've exposed that rot. Now I must decide what to do about it. Vivienne's heart hammered. This could go either way. The queen could protect her or sacrifice her for political stability. The monarch continued. Lord Pemberton will be hunted down, arrested, tried properly this time, in public, with full transparency. His escape has embarrassed the crown. That won't be forgiven. And me? You will have your estate returned fully, your title, your position, with the crown's explicit support. Vivienne felt dizzy, relief and disbelief mixing. Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't thank me yet. There are conditions, always. You will not seek revenge on the families of the conspirators. Their punishment is imprisonment of their patriarchs. That's sufficient. Further vengeance creates martyrs. Understood. And you will use your position to create the reforms you claim to support. Schools, businesses, real change, not just rhetoric. That was always my intention. Good. The Queen's expression softened slightly. You've earned this, Lady Vivienne, not through birth or marriage, through courage and refusal to break. That's rare. She extended her hand. Not a handshake. The gesture of a monarch acknowledging an equal. Vivienne took it, felt the weight of that acknowledgement. Go, rest. You look half dead. Tomorrow we'll make the official announcements. Today you've done enough. The dismissal was gentle, final. Vivienne and Edmund were escorted back out, through different corridors this time, away from the crowd. Outside, a carriage waited, royal crest on the side, protection and legitimacy in one symbol. They climbed inside. The door closed. The carriage moved. And finally, Vivienne let herself collapse. The adrenaline drained away, left her shaking, exhausted, barely able to sit upright. Edmund caught her, held her steady. It's over. His voice was rough with emotion. You won. She wanted to believe that, wanted to feel victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. So deeply tired, she could barely remember what not being exhausted felt like. Take me home. Where's home? Blackthorne Manor. It's mine again. Time to reclaim it. The ride took an hour, long enough for Vivienne to doze, to let unconsciousness take the edge off. She woke as they pulled up to the manor. Her manor. The place she'd fought so hard to keep and lost and now had back. It looked the same, imposing, cold, beautiful in its severity. But it felt different now. Not a prison, not a trophy, just a building, stone and history and potential. What she made of it was up to her. Margaret waited at the door. The older woman's face crumpled when she saw Vivienne. My lady. Oh, my lady. I thought... I know. Vivienne hugged her, hard. I thought so too. Inside, the manor was exactly as she'd left it. Her study, her rooms, everything preserved, like the staff had known she'd return. Mrs. Thorne appeared from the kitchens. The housekeeper's face showed no emotion, but her eyes were wet. Welcome home, my lady. It's good to be back. That night, Vivienne stood in her study, the room where everything had started, where she'd found Adrian's letters, where she'd made the choice to fight. Edmund found her there, brought tea she didn't ask for but accepted gratefully. What happens now, he asked. Now I rebuild, properly this time. Not just the estate, everything. And Pemberton will be caught, tried, punished. That's Hastings' problem now. Mine is making sure this never happens again. How? By changing the system that enabled it. By giving women power that can't be taken away. By building something that outlasts me. She turned to him. Thank you. For everything. For standing with me when anyone sane would have run. I'm not known for my sanity. She smiled. First genuine smile in months. Apparently not. They stood in comfortable silence. Two people who'd been through hell and survived. Finally, Edmund spoke again. What about us? What about us? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Vivienne thought about it, about trust, about whether she could ever open herself to someone again. After Adrian, after Thomas, after all the betrayals. I don't know. She answered honestly. I don't know if I'm capable of that anymore, of trusting someone completely. I'm not asking for complete trust, just a chance. And if I can't give you that, then we're friends, allies. That's enough. She studied his face, looking for the lie, the hidden agenda, found nothing but sincerity and patience, and something that might have been love, but he was smart enough not to name it. Maybe, someday. When I've learned how to be a person again instead of a weapon, I'll wait. You might be waiting a long time. I've got time. She believed him, or wanted to believe him, which was close enough. The next days were a blur of official proceedings. Pemberton was captured trying to flee to France, brought back in chains, his second arrest more humiliating than the first. His trial was public, every detail exposed. The escape, the assassination attempt, the continued conspiracy. He was sentenced to death for treason, the harshest penalty possible. Vivienne attended the sentencing, sat in the gallery, watched him led away, felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief. Nothing. He was just another man who'd chosen power over principle and paid the price. Thomas Webb was tried separately. His sentence was lighter, prison instead of execution, but his life was over regardless. No one would hire a known forger. No one would trust him. He'd live, but in obscurity and poverty, his own ambition destroying him in the end. Vivienne didn't attend that trial. Didn't need to. He was no longer relevant. The families of the original 8 conspirators tried to mount a social campaign against her, spreading rumors, attempting to revive the accusations. It failed spectacularly. Public opinion had shifted. Vivienne was no longer the vindictive wife. She was the woman who'd exposed corruption, who'd nearly been killed for it, who'd survived and come back stronger. She was a hero, whether she wanted to be or not. With that status came opportunity. Vivienne used it ruthlessly. She opened 5 schools for girls in the first year, funded by her estate and donations from supporters. She created lending programs for widows, bought failing businesses and restructured them with women in leadership. She testified before Parliament about the need for legal reforms, property rights for women, protection from domestic violence, access to education. Some of it passed. Most failed. But the conversation started. Seeds planted that would grow after she was gone. She also kept her promise to Marrow. The gang leader received funding for legitimate businesses, employment for her people, a path out of criminality that didn't require surrender or shame. It was controversial. Aristocrats funding criminals. But Vivienne didn't care about controversy anymore. She cared about keeping her word, about repaying the loyalty that had saved her life. 1 year after her return, Blackthorne Manor hosted its first ball since Adrian's arrest. Vivienne had debated whether to hold it. Balls had been the site of so much humiliation, so much performance and pretense, but she decided they could be reclaimed, made into something new, something honest. So she invited everyone, aristocrats and merchants, politicians and artists, the respectable and the questionable. Even Marrow received an invitation. The woman declined. Too public. Too exposed. But she sent a gift, a knife, ornately decorated, beautiful and deadly. Vivienne kept it on her desk, a reminder of who her real allies were. The ball was talked about for months, not because of scandal, because of hope, because it represented something London hadn't seen before, a mixing of worlds, a possibility that the rigid social order might bend instead of break. Edmund attended. Of course. He stayed close, but not possessively, gave her space while being present. They'd grown closer over the year, slowly, carefully, learning each other outside of crisis and desperation. There was something there, something that might become love if given time and safety. But Vivienne wasn't rushing, wasn't forcing. She'd learned that lesson too well. Some things couldn't be rebuilt quickly. Trust was one of them. Late in the evening, she found herself alone on the balcony, looking out over the grounds, the gardens she'd restored, the estate she'd rebuilt, everything she'd lost and reclaimed. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Edmund, holding 2 glasses of wine. Escaping your own party. Needed air, needed quiet. He handed her a glass, stood beside her, not touching, just present. They drank in silence, watched the moonlight on grass. Finally, Vivienne spoke. Do you ever wonder if it was worth it? Everything we went through, everything we risked, every day. And I think the question is wrong. It wasn't about worth. It was about necessity. You couldn't live the way things were. So you changed them. The cost doesn't make it less necessary. She considered that, found truth in it. I'm not the same person I was when this started. I was softer then, more naive. You were younger. We all were. I thought love was enough, that marriage was partnership, that the world was fair if you worked hard and played by the rules. And now? Now I know love isn't enough. Marriage is a contract that favors men, and the world is only fair for people with power to enforce fairness. That's bleak. That's true. But it doesn't have to stay that way. That's why we fight. Not because we'll win completely, but because we can make it slightly less unfair for whoever comes after. She turned to him. You never asked me for anything. This whole time. You helped. You risked. You stood beside me. But you never demanded anything in return. I wanted to. But you didn't. Because demanding something from someone who's barely surviving is cruelty. You needed an ally, not another person taking from you. And now that I'm no longer barely surviving, now I'm still waiting. Because you're still rebuilding, still learning who you are outside of fighting. I won't rush that. What if I never become someone who can love again? What if that part of me is too broken? Then we're friends who've been through hell together. That's not nothing. She studied his face. This man who'd proven loyalty without demanding proof of hers in return. Maybe she could trust again. Maybe not completely, not blindly, but enough. Enough to try. She kissed him, quick, tentative, testing. He didn't push for more, just accepted what she offered, let her set the pace. When they pulled apart, he smiled. Genuine, warm. That's a start. That's all I can give right now. Then that's enough. They stood on the balcony until the party wound down, until guests departed and servants cleaned up, and the manor settled into quiet. Then they went inside together, not to bed, not yet, just to sit by the fire and talk until dawn about everything and nothing, about the future she wanted to build, the reforms she'd push for, the women she'd help, about his business, his plans for expansion, his dreams of industry that treated workers fairly, about the world they wanted to create, knowing they'd never see it fully realized but determined to start it anyway. As dawn broke over Blackthorne Manor, Vivienne felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not the absence of conflict, the presence of purpose, of knowing who she was, what she stood for, what she'd fight for, and what she'd let go. She'd lost everything and rebuilt from rubble, had been betrayed and vindicated, had run and returned, had nearly died and chose to live. And in surviving all of it, she'd discovered something crucial. She was stronger than she'd ever imagined, not because suffering made her strong, but because she'd refused to let suffering define her. She'd chosen to grow instead of break, to fight instead of hide, to become something new instead of mourning what was lost. That was power. Real power. The kind that came from within, that couldn't be taken by laws or men or circumstance, the kind that changed the world. 3 years later, Lady Vivienne Ashford stood before Parliament. She'd been invited to speak about proposed legislation, reforms that would give married women property rights, that would allow them legal recourse in cases of abandonment or abuse. It was historic. A woman addressing Parliament, even from the gallery, even without a vote. It was unthinkable, revolutionary, terrifying to some. She didn't care. She spoke for an hour, detailed the legal gaps that had nearly destroyed her, the lack of protection, the assumption that women existed only as extensions of men. She proposed solutions, practical, implementable, based on years of research and lived experience. Some legislators listened, many dismissed her, a few were openly hostile, but the speech was recorded, printed in newspapers, distributed across England. Women read it, took courage from it, started demanding change in their own lives. The law didn't pass that year, or the next. But the conversation continued. The pressure built. 10 years after Vivienne's speech, a limited property rights bill became law. Married women could own assets separately, could inherit without male approval. It wasn't everything, but it was something, a crack in the foundation of absolute male control. Vivienne lived to see it, celebrated it, then kept pushing for more. She never remarried. Edmund asked once. She declined gently. Marriage had been her cage. She had no interest in returning to it, even with someone she trusted. But they stayed together, partners in work and life, building an empire of reform and industry that reshaped parts of England. She funded schools until she had 20 across the country, created apprenticeship programs, lobbied for labor laws. She became one of the most powerful women in England, not through title, through work, through refusing to be ignored or dismissed. Her story became legend, the duchess who fought back, the woman who brought down an empire of corruption. New versions emerged with each telling, some exaggerated, some minimized, but the core remained. A woman had been betrayed, had lost everything, and instead of disappearing into shame and poverty, she'd rebuilt herself into something unstoppable. That story mattered, gave other women permission to fight their own battles, to refuse their own cages. Not all of them won. Many didn't survive the attempt, but some did, and they changed things, slowly, painfully, one victory at a time. When Vivienne was old, when her hair had gone white and her body had slowed, she returned to Devil's Acre one last time. Marrow was gone by then, dead in a street fight years earlier, but her people remained, now running legitimate businesses, thriving. They recognized Vivienne despite the years, welcomed her like a queen. She walked those narrow alleys one last time, remembered the fear, the desperation, the moment when criminals had been the only ones willing to help. She'd kept her promises to them, every single one, and they'd kept theirs to her. That evening, sitting in the building that had once hidden her from assassins, Vivienne wrote her final letter. Not to anyone specific, to everyone who would read her story after she was gone, to whoever finds themselves trapped, betrayed, destroyed by systems built to crush them. I was you once, a woman with no power, no options, no hope. I survived not because I was special, but because I refused to accept that survival wasn't possible. You will be told to be quiet, to accept your place, to make peace with injustice, ignore them, fight, scheme, ally with unexpected people, use every tool and trick and desperate measure available. You will fail sometimes. You will be betrayed. You will lose things you thought were essential. Survive anyway, because survival is the first act of rebellion, and everything else builds from there. I don't know if you'll win. I won because of luck as much as effort, timing, circumstance. But I know if you don't try, you've already lost. So try. Even when it's impossible, especially then. The world changes because people who have nothing left to lose decide to risk everything. Be that person. Be terrifying in your refusal to break. And maybe, just maybe, you'll build something that outlasts you. Good luck. You'll need it. Vivienne. She sealed the letter, left it with the keeper of what had once been Marrow's territory, now run by a young woman who reminded Vivienne of herself decades ago. Angry, smart, dangerous, perfect. Lady Vivienne Ashford died at 73, peacefully, in her sleep. In Blackthorne Manor, surrounded by people who'd loved her not for her title but for her choices. Edmund went first, 6 months earlier. She mourned him properly, then kept working. Because that's what you did. You survived. You continued. Her funeral was attended by thousands, aristocrats and former criminals, politicians and reformers. Women whose lives she'd changed and women who'd never met her but knew her story. They buried her in the family plot. Next to no one. She'd outlived or outlasted everyone who'd shared her name. Her gravestone was simple. Her name. Her dates. And one line. She refused to break. That was enough. That was everything. Years after her death, historians would debate her legacy. Some called her a revolutionary, others an opportunist. Most agreed she'd been complicated, flawed, human. She'd made mistakes, had been cruel when necessary, had used people, had survived by being harder than her enemies. But she'd also created change, had opened doors, had proven that women could fight and win. That mattered more than purity, more than perfection. It mattered that she'd tried, and kept trying even when it cost everything. The schools she'd founded continued, grew, educated generations of women who went on to demand more, to push harder, to refuse their own cages. The businesses she'd restructured became models for fair labor practices, proof that profit and principle could coexist. The laws she'd lobbied for evolved, expanded, became foundations for future reforms. She didn't change everything, didn't destroy patriarchy or create utopia, but she bent the arc of history, just slightly, just enough. And in the end, that was all anyone could do. Bend things toward justice, push against systems built to resist, create cracks that others could widen. Lady Vivienne Ashford had been many things: wife, duchess, fugitive, reformer. But mostly she'd been stubborn, too stubborn to quit, too stubborn to accept injustice as inevitable. That stubbornness changed England, not overnight, not completely, but enough. And sometimes enough is everything.